Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, Excellencies, dear guests, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Oksana Machuka, and it is my great honor and pleasure to welcome you on this all-online event, broadcast live, the Policy Dialogue launch of the UNDP-IOM multi-year roadmap for cooperation on migration and sustainable development in the Republic of Moldova. The date of the event, 16 June, is not a simple coincidence. Today, we are also observing the International Day of Family Remittances, adopted by the United Nations General Assembly. While migrants and diaspora play such an important role in keeping essential services and the economy at large running, this day comes to reconfirm once again and recognize the contributions of millions of migrant workers, both women and men, who send money home to their family members' health, helping their country, their local community, and their people. This event aims to present the joint UNDP-IOM multi-year roadmap for cooperation on migration and sustainable development in the Republic of Moldova. It will also facilitate an open dialogue among diverse stakeholders in the field of migration, including Moldovan government agencies, international organizations, academic research institutions, international financial institutions, Moldovan migrant organizations, and the private sectors. It actually has a threefold goal: to discuss the opportunities to enhance cooperation with development partners and national authorities in the area of migration and sustainable development in Moldova, to enhance national and international policy development in the area of migration and development, and ultimately, the perceived goal is to elaborate on a set of work streams aimed at integrating migration into COVID-19 socioeconomic recovery plans, Moldova's green transition, and migration as an accelerator for achieving SDGs. This event will last approximately 3 hours and 40 minutes. It will consist of a presentation, 3 panel discussions, which will reflect the main pillars outlined in the joint roadmap, and will culminate with a facilitated discussion of the results from the panelists. I would like to remind you that the event is live streamed on Facebook pages of UNDP and IOM Moldova, on Privesc.eu in Romanian, and on UNDP YouTube channel in English. Please note that we will be taking questions and forwarding them to the panelists in the facilitated discussion session. To all those of you who are watching the event online, on Zoom, via Facebook or YouTube, if you have any question you would like to ask, please write it in the comments to the streams in the Zoom questions and answer section, and add who are you addressing it to and who you are. And we will make sure that it is well addressed and answered. Let us wish all of us a good event today and a great discussion. And now, with your permission, it is my great pleasure and honor to give the floor to Mr. Luca Randa, the head of the Recovery Solutions and Human Mobility Crisis Bureau, UNDP, for his welcoming speech. Mr. Luca, the floor is all yours.
Thank you very much, Oksana, and it's a real pleasure to be with you all today. Such a distinguished group of panelists and participants. Greetings from New York. It's very early in the morning, but I really was, I could not miss this opportunity and accept the invite that was given to me to open this event. I will use this few minutes maybe to provide a global perspective of UNDP's work on human mobility, and it's so good to see some of the people who actually contributed to shape our approach to human mobility over the years. In particular, I see Daniel Naujaks, who's been collaborating with UNDP in many occasions. Kathleen Newland, who also worked recently on a report called Human Mobility Shared Opportunities. A special greetings to my good friend Dima Al-Khatib, UNDP resident representative, colleagues from UNDP, IOM, government official, Swiss Cooperation, and all of you. First of all, let me say, ever since the adoption of the Global Compact on migration, the theme of human mobility or migration and development has been really elevated within UNDP. Our administrator, Achim Steiner, has actually given clear instruction to country offices, regional bureaus, central teams to engage much more on this issue. This was stemming, let's say, from an increased demand from our program countries for support. But the fact that this was a theme that was recurring and increasing in priority within national policy debate, within the public opinion, and of course the adoption of the Global Compact was a major milestone, and it was very revealing the fact that this was a Global Compact very much led by the states themselves, contrary to other instruments where it's more a UN-led process. This was very much led by the member states. And if looking at UNDP, at how we see human mobility, when we apply a human development lens to it, we see that it really has an intrinsic value because it's an expression of a fundamental freedom. But at the same time, it has an instrumental value because there is increased evidence that if properly regulated, human mobility can be a key driver of development. And we often talk about triple wins, human mobility as benefiting not only those who migrate, but also the communities of destination and the countries of destination, as well as the countries of origin. And clearly remittances, one of the channels through which these benefits is transmitted. And it's very good that today we are having this event in the occasion of the International Day of Family Remittances. The second point that I want to make is that, of course, UNDP does this within the context of the broader UN family. We bring our development, broad development mandate, and the developmental approach, but we operate within the family of the UN. And here, I want to mention in particular the UN Network on Migration as a space where UN agencies discuss and align their position, speak with one voice, and actually support, the main task there is to support countries in the implementation of the Global Compact. And it's good to see here Jonathan Prentice in this opening segment, joining with me as head of the secretariat of the network. Among the many work streams that happen in the network, I want to mention in particular the working group that have produced training packages for UN country team, but also countries and governments on how to incorporate the Global Compact into their policies, into their planning processes. Let me touch briefly on the partnership with IOM in particular. This is a long-standing relationship, but last year, our two principals, both the UNDP administrator and the Director General of IOM, really issued marching orders to all of our teams on the ground to deepen that partnership and to deepen that collaboration. And it was, of course, in part motivated by the pandemic and the idea that we should redouble our effort to promote inclusive recovery strategies. But at the same time, it was a recognition that the two agencies have a lot in common and are a very complementary mandate, and that it was our responsibility, therefore, to increase our level of collaboration to support the countries that we serve. Last year, we actually launched an initiative. It was a call for proposal for country to present ideas on how UNDP and IOM could work together to foster more inclusive recovery strategies from the pandemic. We got several of our teams on the ground participating in that call, and Moldova was one of them. And in the end, actually, Moldova, what they presented was a slightly different and rather unique proposal, which was to work on the roadmap. So to really broaden that existing partnership within the two agencies into a multi-year program. And that seemed to us an excellent way to proceed. And so we were glad to support that initiative. And we're very happy to see today, this idea materialize and into such a rich panel and rich discussion. And particularly, let me finally conclude to talk briefly about Moldova. Moldova has been one of those country offices or UNDP country office that has been always referred to as a best practice, in particular when it comes to engaging diaspora and engaging the diaspora through remittances for development in the country, and particularly work with municipalities and a broad range of partners. We actually used the experience in Moldova. We codified it and make it available, to the rest of our country offices. So again, congratulations to the team in Moldova, and a special thanks to the Swiss cooperation that has been supporting this process over the years. And it's I trust will continue to be a partner in this. Let me conclude by wishing you a very productive and inspiring session. We will be watching this very closely, and we will be definitely making sure that the deliberation, the decision, the discussion will then enrich both the rest of our country offices, but also the UNDP's overall approach. Let me end with a quote from the administrator of UNDP just last week at a joint event with IOM. He said, human mobility is not a problem to be solved, but a value to be treasured. And this is a spirit very much in which we are all collectively work together. Thank you very much. Over to you, Sam.
Thank you very much, Mr. Renda, for your remarks. Indeed, migration is a complex phenomenon, and besides its huge and tremendous challenges that it brings a lot of opportunities indeed. And it requires concerted efforts. And it is amazing to see how UNDP and IOM join their efforts along with other partners along the way to transform it from a problem into an opportunity for the Republic of Moldova and also in other countries as well. This being said, I would like to further on give the floor to Mr. Jonathan Prentice, head of the Secretariat of the UN Migration Network. Dear Mr. Jonathan, the screen is all yours.
Thank you very much, Oksana. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we hear you very well and we see you very well.
Wonderful. Well, listen, it's really a pleasure to be here. So I'm very grateful to the organizers for inviting the Network Secretariat to say a few words at the outset of this important gathering. And it's a real pleasure to come after Luca, UNDP. He was too modest to say this, but UNDP really is a central member of the executive committee of the network and really a driving force behind making this strange interagency beast a reality, and an increasingly, I think, productive reality. So it's great to be with UNDP colleagues, IOM colleagues, and others in the UN system, and representatives from the government of Moldova. Luca placed his comments in a broader context, and I'm actually going to do the same, but from a slightly different angle. And really commend you for the really vital importance that this initiative has the potential to unleash. We're at an extremely important, in a promising way, phase of the Global Compact for safe, orderly, and regular migration. We're on the verge of completing the regional reviews, with Africa's coming up next month. And then after that, attention will turn slowly but inexorably towards the global review, the International Migration Review Forum, which we anticipate will take place in May of 2022, so just under a year away from now, in the General Assembly in New York. And this is a unique opportunity for us. It is unique because there has never been a global review of the GCM before. We have the opportunity to help shape its focus and its level of ambition, and to help guide the international community for the subsequent 4 years in how to strengthen our global migration governance structures. So I would really urge us all to start using the IMRF as the prism, the target that we are all working towards in the immediate future. And I think one of the key challenges that we have, and this is why I am so pleased to hear of this initiative, is the need to demonstrate on the ground the utility of the GCM as a cooperative framework. We need to harvest examples of how this framework can benefit in tangible terms the lives of migrants and their communities. And we also need to demonstrate, though this is of second order importance, how the UN system truly can come together in support of those efforts. So we at the global level are thrilled by the multiplication of country networks. Now over 1/3 of UN country teams has a migration coordination mechanism designed to ensure joined up support for the implementation of the GCM. And of course, one of these exists in Moldova. These networks provide really vital platforms for events such as this, to make sure that the full range of migration issues can be discussed, whether in Geneva or New York, or also vitally at national and regional levels. It allows us to drill down into the objectives that have been enunciated, the 23 objectives in the GCM. Obviously today, Objective 20 around remittances will be of relevance, but many others I think will be touched on today, including access to legal pathways and so on and so forth. It allows us to take full use of the guiding principles, the 10 guiding principles in the GCM, which I liken to the framework as the framework's DNA. Those commitments to national sovereignty, to international law, to upholding our global human rights commitments, to being child sensitive, gender responsive, and importantly, for bringing together all the different bits of our national partners, whether in government, including local authorities, or civil society and other stakeholders. I think one of the great achievements in the GCM was the recognition that these issues, these migration issues, were beyond the capacity of not just any one state to achieve alone, but any one entity. So it required bringing governments together, and it required bringing stakeholders together, not as an afterthought, but as integral partners in the design and implementation of the programs under development. And of course, these networks also allow us to take opportunities to build on the architecture that is outlined in the GCM. And by this, I mean not just the global review, the IMRF, but the Secretary General's report that the General Assembly has mandated he deliver in advance of the IMRF. And this is an important report because in addition to being an update on the state of health of the GCM, he is also mandated to provide direction and guidance to steer the focus of the IMRF. So we have an opportunity to identify something we're not always very good at in the UN system, to identify some core priority issues that we should focus on, not at the expense of others, but recognizing that the GCM is a very broad text, and that at certain points, we do need to identify some issues over others. And in addition to the Secretary General's report, there is the capacity building mechanism. We have launched the Migration Network Hub. I would encourage colleagues in Moldova to take full use of it. This hub cannot exist without you providing it with the necessary oxygen. The oxygen of using it for its debating spaces, the oxygen of using it to place there the best practices that you are developing. And Luca said at the outset that UNDP views its office there as an example of that best practice. How can we harvest and systematically maintain an increasing repository of the very best practice in the field of the GCM? And then finally, of course, and of considerable interest to everyone understandably, in terms of the architecture, is the multi-partner trust fund. This is the only dedicated pooled fund to migration in the international system. It has been launched. The first 7 joint programs have been financed, are underway. There is a pipeline document of over 30 priority joint programs. Moldova is included in those. This is a very useful document because it helps do a number of things. It helps fundraise and it helps answer the question, a deceptively easy question with a difficult answer. What does GCM implementation look like? Here we have concrete illustrations of what we can do with national partners, with stakeholders as a joined up system, effectively to realize the ambition of the GCM. So again, I would encourage in your consultation with donors on the ground to urge them to breathe life, further life, I shouldn't suggest it's at death's door, further life into the multi-partner trust fund. So I think these are some of the tools you have at your hand. This is the broad calendar to which we are working. And I just commend today's event for really focusing on the impact question that I think is going to be so vital for the next cycle in the life of the GCM and the network. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, dear Mr. Prentice. Indeed, I think one of the keywords today is joint, besides many other essential aspects that you highlighted. And the tools that you have mentioned certainly are extremely important, and they are key in terms of delivering on the DCM, but also on other priorities that are planned under the migration and development agenda in Moldova, but also globally. So thank you very much for all the work you are doing under the Migration Network. Indeed, it allows bringing together all the relevant actors to properly address migration and make it work for development. With this being said, dear ladies and gentlemen, dear guests, I would like to invite you to move to our next session, launching of the UNDP-IOM roadmap. It is my pleasure and honor to give the floor to Ms. Dima Al-Kadib, UNDP resident representative to the Republic of Moldova, for her welcoming speech. Dear Ms. Al-Kadib, the screen is all yours.
Thank you very much, Oksana, and good seeing you, good seeing everybody else joining us today for this extremely interesting policy dialogue dedicated to the launch of this joint collaboration roadmap between us and IOM on migration and development, and also wishing everyone a happy International Remittances Day, Family Remittances Day, and this year it is under the theme of recovery and resilience through digital and financial inclusion. As mentioned by my colleagues, there is a strong commitment that has driven us for a holistic SDGs and people-centered approach to address migration issues, namely as the world is recovering from the COVID-19 implications. And this is where we have joined effort, UNDP and IOM Moldova, and embarked on this joint exercise for developing this multi-year roadmap for cooperation on migration and sustainable development. We do also, I mean, I'd like to highlight that we do perceive that the current crisis is also an equal opportunity for change, for reform, and for enhanced inclusion. And it requires collaborative approaches and a genuine engagement with citizens, including migrants and diaspora, and exploring new opportunities to support the recovery and the development process of the country. And while this cooperation roadmap is developed by UNDP and IOM, it aims at actually framing and guiding the strategic partnership with other national and development partners, as well as the broader UN family, in support of Moldova's response and recovery efforts and the advancement of the 2030 agenda. Last year, when we did our socioeconomic impact assessment in partnership with our sister agency, UNFPA, as well as several other assessments, they have revealed the enhanced vulnerability of the returning migrants, many of whom have been forced to reevaluate their job perspectives abroad and to return abruptly to the country. And while in Moldova, they also face some challenges, including in, at the level of integration, but also the access to services such as health services. So this is why, and nowadays it's extremely important that we place migration at the center of policy discussions and recovery efforts related to the ongoing pandemic, but also beyond that, given these close interlinkages with livelihoods, poverty eradication, economic development, employment, and many other development sectors. And as you will see from the presentations that will follow, our common vision covers a broad range of priority areas, from addressing the root causes of immigration to engaging diaspora in the development of the country, including economic development, enhancing labor migration, and ensuring opportunities for reintegration. And this has been, developed following an in-depth analysis of the country's strategies, plans, documents, statistical profiles. And, it was extensively discussed and in a participatory manner designed, involving the key stakeholders and the institutional partners, and covering a broad range of clusters of work. It also builds on the cumulative experience on the ground, led by both our organizations, such as with the ongoing partnership with the Swiss Development Cooperation on Migration and Development, through which we had a successful engagement of diaspora in local development, and it continues to grow at scale. And after the presentation of the roadmap, we will also be able to discuss with you these areas and many other aspects and potential solutions. So we look very much forward to this discussion, and we're very pleased to be able to benefit from the renowned international experts and representatives of partners institutions who are also with us today. I just also want to quote our UN Secretary General for this day, where he, unquote, said, quoting, "Looking forward, we must continue our efforts to support and protect migrants who, as the COVID pandemic has made clear, play such an important role in keeping essential services and the economy at large running in many parts of the world." So with these inspiring words, I would like to thank you very much for being with us today, and I look forward to the insights. And again, thank you very much for joining us today, and over to you, Oksana. Thanks.
Thank you, dear Miss Dima. Always a pleasure to hear and to see you. Thank you very much for your kind remarks. Indeed, migration is a cross-cutting issue, and this event, once again, is a great opportunity to discuss about how exactly migration is interfering with many other aspects of life, and you have highlighted them in your speech. Thank you very much for your intervention. And with that being said, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Lars Johan Lundbäck, IOM Chief of Mission to Moldova, for his welcoming remarks. Dear Mr. Lars, the floor is all yours.
Thank you so much, Oksana. Thank you to Luca and Jonathan also for setting the stage here, and in particular to Jonathan, just to mention that already tomorrow, me and Dima will be chairing the local migration network here in Chisinau, looking at integrating migration into the United Nations Common Country Analysis. So this is certainly going ahead full speed and making the GCM relevant. So I'm extremely proud to present this roadmap on migration and development together with my dear friend and colleague, Ms. Dima Al-Khatib. For those who have been studying Moldova, and those who have, for them certainly it has not gone unnoticed that the Moldovan diaspora is not a historic diaspora, but one really of flesh and blood that means so much for Moldova as a country looking forward. Whether it is keeping on sending remittances during the hard times of the COVID, or returning with talent, or for that matter, stepping up to the urns moving forward. We feel that this roadmap really strikes a balance between migrants' vulnerability and agency. So we are not taking one specific view on the predicament of the migrants, but actually looking at their very strong agency and productive capacity. And one thing that we're really kicking off this roadmap with is really looking and understanding this in depth. And this will be laid out quite clearly when we listen to the description of this roadmap. Also, I'd like to mention that there is a particularity with regards to this roadmap, and that is that we have a very clear focus on migrant sending communities. We feel that this is very important because of the specific situation here in Moldova, where so many families remain, children remain, often in vulnerable situations, and during COVID, so many of the families have been threatened to fall under the poverty line because of decreased remittances. So we're looking forward very much to hear from the partners, including at the Columbia University, that have been supported so much by the local expert group, MPI, and of course all of our collaborators in the Moldovan government. And I also have to give a specific and a special recognition to our friends at the Swiss, from the Switzerland representation and the UK embassy. They were the ones who actually nudged us into action during last year's Family Remittances Day. And this has been a sense of, in one sense, a continuation of that strong engagement for this particular day, looking at the specific contributions of the Moldovan migrants to their home country. So thank you very much for enabling me to give these remarks, and we're looking really much forward to this full day of discussing migration and development and how we can take this forward. So, in
particular, for highlighting once again how important it is to focus on migrant sending communities. With this being said, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to, without further ado, invite you to step in the session where we will be hearing the presentation of our star today, the Roadmap for Cooperation on Migration and Sustainable Development in the Republic of Moldova. With that being said, please join me in welcoming Mr. Daniel Naujoks, who is also the Interim Director of the International Organization and UN Studies Specialization, School of International and Public Affairs of the Columbia University, and one of the main authors and the team leaders of the roadmap. Dear Daniel, the screen is all yours.
Thank you, Oksana, and thank you everybody for being here. It is an honor and a privilege to discuss what we have done in cooperation with IOM, or led by IOM and UNDP at the country level with many other stakeholders. In the next few minutes, I'm going to race you, and I apologize for this, through the many aspects of the actual roadmap. As our colleagues at UNDP, IOM, and the UN Network for Migration have set the stage in the broader sense, now we're really going to dive into details of what the roadmap is supposed to do or is planning to do. And then I look forward very much to discussing and hearing from the other experts and your questions in the audience about what you think should be done, how this should be implemented. And you can see the scope is very broad. So just give you a brief background, and Ms. Al-Khatib already mentioned that there are many efforts that went into designing this roadmap. This was not an academic exercise where we just sat at the table and discussed it. We looked at more than 80 different strategies at the government of Moldova through all the different areas of work. We looked at many different statistical evidence, including the new COVID-related socioeconomic responses, impacts on migration, and more in general. We also consulted the latest literature on migration, development, diaspora, immigration, and tried to condense all this knowledge into the knowledge and into the roadmap. But more important than these documents were really our consultations. We are very thankful for the government partners who shared their knowledge. And I have worked in Moldova and with Moldova for the last 8-9 years in different capacities. And I'm always really happy to hear and learn from our government partners, the Bureau for Diaspora Relations, the Organization for Small and Medium-Sized Enterprises, ODIM, the Labor Ministry, and all these different actors have a wealth of knowledge to share with us. And of course, UNDP-IOM in the country at the regional offices, headquarters, the entire UN country team, other UN entities really shared their knowledge. And we were very grateful for the local and diaspora civil society organizations who, in the process of writing the roadmap, but also in validating what we came up with in the end, really shared really important key points. And I also would like to really thank the local consultant team at Expert Group, Dumitru Pintea and Stas Madan, who were really critical for getting a lot of the research done, for backing us with the local knowledge. And I had excellent support here at Columbia University by 2 graduate student experts, Lizelle Vincent and Nathan Edwards, who really were critical for our expert team. We have 5 pillars in the roadmap, and I'm going through them in the next few minutes, but this is just an overview. The first one is on data, evidence, and drivers. The second one is on diaspora engagement. The third one is on SME development, financial interventions, investments mostly on remittances. The fourth is a large pillar on labor mobility, on reintegration, skills development, and the last kind of innovative pillar in the context of Moldova is on migration and climate change. And overall, the objective of the roadmap is to really, and pardon the jargon, but to strengthen the strategic partnership between IOM and UNDP and other partners, as mentioned before, in order to help the government of Moldova and Moldova as a society, as an economy, as people with the diaspora and in Moldova to overcome COVID. And this is not really about COVID per se, but this is in terms of building back better, building forward better, creating better systems, building on what there is to have use migration as a potential for development in the future. So the first pillar really aligns also with the Global Compact on Migration, the first objective of the Global Compact, and the first pillar is about data, about evidence, about understanding many things. And the first component, again, just for you to understand the structure of the roadmap, we have pillars, components, and then we have results and outputs as the next level. Moldova, as has been mentioned by several speakers today, is often used as a best case, right? It's a case study of great innovation, of things that have been done. And rightly so, there are a lot of innovative programs. However, in consultation with the government, we discovered that many of those flagship programs and flagship initiatives, we don't know what the impact is. The ideas and the concepts are really good, but we don't know exactly what the impacts are. So I think understanding really what the policies and programs do on the ground is key for learning from it, from expanding them, from making them better. So the first component is really about creating new impacts on the knowledge on the impacts of the migration and diaspora programs. And the second one includes a lot of these things that we've been discussing in the migration field about new data on migration, new data sources and enhancing data sources, and not just about how many migrants, but really understanding the composition of the diaspora, the potential, the capabilities of the diaspora, more in detail than just having a profile that says there are that many migrants somewhere. And that includes also better analysis of remittances and diaspora savings and other aspects of migration data. The third component under this first pillar is about the root causes and drivers of mobility. And we've been discussing this a lot in the last 10 years or so of migration studies. And it's really, we have a limited understanding about what exactly are the triggers and the drivers of migration in specifics, and how development programs can actually make a difference to enable people to remain if they wish to do so. The first component is really, it's about dissemination, making sure that the knowledge created within the roadmap is implemented, is feeding into the program design, into policies in Moldova and abroad. The second pillar is about diaspora engagement and diaspora networks. Moldova, again, has implemented a range of very important institutions and programs that can be built on, but they can still be improved, as our consultations with the government, with civil society and the diaspora have shown. So the first one is increasing meaningful and diverse diaspora engagement. Moldova actually has a broad range of councils and committees that seek the inputs of the diaspora into policymaking, into understanding the relevance of diaspora contributions, but their impact and how they are conducted is limited. So we have suggested a few ways to support the government of Moldova to create them in a more meaningful way. And also to build more capacity building for diaspora associations, so they can actually leverage some of the potential of the diaspora. The another component of pillar 2 is overall about capacity building for the government at the central and the local level in Moldova. Again, the raione, the municipalities are really important actors and that have stepped up a lot, that have done a lot of things, but we can again further support their capacity building. Migrants and diaspora can again have access to information that's per se not a new heading, but there is the Bureau for Diaspora Relations, one of the key institutions in Moldova working on relations between the government, local actors, and the diaspora, has or is in the process of launching a digital diaspora hub that may actually be further increase in terms of the offerings. And again, it's not important what you do, it's important what comes out, what the impacts are. So really understand not just activities, but the theory of change, of leading to the diaspora and migrants being better informed. Channeling diaspora contributions into local development projects. We have a flagship program, the DAR 1+3 project, which is a little bit modeled or similar to the 3-for-1 program that Mexico used to have for a long period of time, where the collective remittances, collective donations from the diaspora feed into local development projects, and it has been a success. But actually we know very little about the actual impacts. And we have come up in consultation with our stakeholders with a few suggestions how to expand it, how to understand the impacts, how to make it more accessible, including maybe a climate and an energy components that may steer certain elements. Moldova's diaspora is really important for the electoral process, and we have seen in the last few elections, and UNDP and IOM have both worked on out of country voting. In the context of Moldova, there are a few things, including better information, expanding alternative voting systems, and other measures that can actually increase the transparency and the active participation of the diaspora in the local political process, and with all the safeguards, of course, that are important for this area. The third pillar is about opportunities for the diaspora to invest into the local economy, financial investments. And here, this is just one component, which really is about remittances. So today on the International Day of Family Remittances, remembering that Moldova's the remittance to Moldova correspond to about 16% of the GDP. So we all know that in Moldova, this is a really important life source for many communities and families and the economy at large. So thinking about specific instruments targeting remittances and savings, mobile money and mobile banking systems, financial literacy that was mentioned earlier by Ms. Al-Khalid. One other flagship program of the government is the PARO 1+1, which channels migrants' remittances into small and medium-sized enterprises, mostly small enterprises and economic activities in Moldova. It has been one of those best practices discussed in the international arena. But there are many ways how this can further be expanded, not just in terms of how much money is channeled, but also in terms of what kind of companies, how mature they are. Right now, it's focusing really on the small companies, but maybe some of these medium-sized companies should also access this funds. How we can, we spoke to the agency that really implements this in Moldova, ODIM, and they come up with a few suggestions how the international community can support making it more inclusive, focusing maybe on some women-led initiatives, and overall addressing some of the shortcomings that these entrepreneurs who receive money find. And also diaspora tourism and trade can be further ways of enhancing and leveraging diaspora funds for development in Moldova. The fourth pillar, as I said, is rather large. It has three sub-pillars. The first one is on labor mobility and skills development. And here, the idea of the roadmap is to provide capacity building on labor migration for key institutions in Moldova, to advocate for migrant protections. Again, that was said earlier that we have to think about protecting migrants, and COVID has, again, shown us that migrants are often more vulnerable. Yes, they are huge resources for resilience, but they sometimes are more vulnerable, and we have to think about broader protection systems, legal protection, social protection, other protection systems for migrant workers, including healthcare and others. The roadmap intends to support the government to develop a program on telework. Again, that's a new development with COVID, and we don't know how the post-pandemic world will be looking like, but everybody expects that certain professions will be able to telework much more. So maybe telework is an alternative to migration, to remain in Moldova, you work elsewhere, and all your earnings are remittances in a way. Enhancing preparedness to crisis-related mobility can be important in including using big data to track vulnerable groups of migrants. And again, IOM and others have used these kind of mechanisms in the past. Another new component, so the BMA, the Bureau for Migration and Asylum in Moldova, has spearheaded a few new initiatives embracing immigration to Moldova. It's still a small scale, but the idea is that immigration policy too can be used as a leverage to support development, what kind of experts are needed in the country, and how immigration, not just immigration, diaspora, can help to support the SDGs and sustainable development in the Republic of Moldova. The second sub-pillar and pillar 4 is about return and socioeconomic reintegration, not just in the times of COVID, where actually return migration has been much less than anticipated in Moldova, but still it has shown once more that even though Moldova has spearheaded some new programs and cooperations within local agencies and national agencies and others on providing support for return migrants and their reintegration, including mixed families where one is Moldovan, one is not, there's a lot of scope for improving the policy environment, the actual support for these returnees. The third pillar and last pillar of this sub-pillar of pillar 4 is on skills retention, skills replenishment. And the first one is really this new concept that is was introduced also in the GCM, the Global Compact on Migration, is on a skills partnership. The idea being that destination countries, let's say Germany and Switzerland and Italy and Israel, that are key destination countries for Moldova, invest in skills in Moldova, not just for emigration, but also in general for Moldovans. But some of these who are being trained can then emigrate with skills that are being recognized in the destination countries, and hence can have higher paid, better and safer jobs. And we have this dual win where people in Moldova have more skills, and those who in the end migrate don't have a brain waste, are not, they have qualifications that are recognized. Skills retention is also important for the health and the education, other sectors and central public sectors in Moldova. So the idea is how to use the support of Moldovan graduates, retaining programs for returning health and education professionals, and other ways to really make sure that key resources are present in Moldova to support development more broadly. And again, this is about attracting migrant expertise through return programs, temporary return programs. UNDP's Talk 10 is very well known. The IOM has implemented MEDEC and other programs, helping temporary return of migrants to support specific development objectives in Moldova. And the last pillar is about migration and climate change. And if you're not familiar with Moldova, you will think, well, Moldova may not be the most obvious example. It's not Tuvalu, where climate change is writ large on everything you do. But actually, there are many ways how the environment, climate change, and migration can, should, and may be linked in the context of Moldova. And I think there's 7 components. The first is we need to understand this better. Again, I'm sound like a broken record here at an academic, but we still need to understand, not just in Moldova, but the world over, better the different links, the indirect and direct links between climate change as a driver, as a factor in the migration decisions. And then integrating mobility into climate change plans. Moldova has submitted, for example, a new nationally determined contribution to the UNFCCC under the Paris Agreement. So there's many ways how mobility can be integrated more into these environmental and climate change plans. The diaspora and migrant communities can be a huge resource when doing planning and in communities, and looking at, when we talk about climate change areas, incorporate some of these participatory mechanisms to listen to the voice of the diaspora in general, but then also look for specific expertise, those who have expertise in agriculture, energy, transport, aspects that are really important for climate change adaptation and mitigation efforts. It can be really important to channel those into important activities in Moldova. Addressing the climate change drivers can be important. Again, we have to understand them first and then think about specific ways of addressing them. And again, I'd be happy in the Q&A to talk more about those. Skills retention, as mentioned in the previous pillar, is also important when we come to migration and climate change, especially when it comes to immigration policies that can actually foster, again, the energy sector, agriculture, and key sectors for climate change adaptation. The last 2 programs, program components, are about diaspora engagements in institutional climate change. Again, dialogues on the diaspora. It's about, and the last one is about enhancing information opportunities and support climate change relevant activities for returned migration. Again, looking at the time migration cycle and seeing how also returned migrants can actually contribute to this. And one thing I forgot to mention in the earlier point was remittances and diaspora savings programs and other investment programs, funds and vehicles can actually be used for adaptation and mitigation efforts in Moldova, so the diaspora's financial contributions to and can help in climate change related programming. My last slide, I promised, and I as I said at the beginning, it's a little hasty because this is a very broad framework. There are 5 different priorities that the entire roadmap is trying to assess or trying to foster. The first is understanding the drivers, the impact, the conditions of migration and related programming. The second is really the government of Moldova is one of the most capable governments I know in terms of devising understanding, but still there are many ways how the international community, experts, people in Moldova, the diaspora, and the broader community can help the government to further strengthen the capacities. There are many programs, some of them may be improved and expanded. Again, it's not just reinventing the wheel, it's about looking at the great policy programs that are in place, but then tweaking them, understanding them, and making them better. But also sometimes we need to create new programs, and we decided to suggest a few new programs. And the last one really is looking at the linkages between different programs, is enhancing the synergies and the collaboration between programs, so they're not standalone streams and tracks, but work in unison to actually create the outputs and outcomes that we wish. Thank you everybody for being here. It is an honor and a privilege to hear your voices, and I look forward to what you have to say on all these different aspects. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear Daniel. Kudos to the entire team. It is an impressive work done. And I think you will all agree with me saying that this fearless roadmap would have not been as comprehensive and substantive without the joint previous work done on migration in the country. Moldova indeed has advanced a lot on the migration and development agenda, and is now, as was already mentioned, seen in many ways as a leading positive example for other countries facing similar challenges. And this huge merit is embedded in the work done so far by IOM, UNDP, and many other partners along the way, along with the strong ownership of the government and constant development partner support throughout all this process. With this being said, dear ladies and gentlemen, allow me to give the floor to Ms. Nadezhda Zubko, who is the director of the Moldovan Diaspora Relations Bureau. Stimată doamnă Zubco, aveți cuvântul și aș vrea să vă reamintesc că aveți 5 minute pentru.
So, Mrs. Zubco, you have the floor and you have 5 minutes for your speech. Thank you very much, Oksana, honored donors and development partners, dear invitees, hello. It is a special pleasure for me to welcome you on behalf of the government of the Republic of Moldova at this event of today, which on the one hand brings in front the International Remittances Day, recognizing at the same time the contribution of the migrants in the socio-economic development of the country of origin, and on the other hand promoting the importance and joint commitment to harness the capacities of this in order to advance in the society. First of all, I would like to thank very much the partners, the IOM and the UNDP, for the sustainable cooperation and loyal cooperation during many years already in the implementation of joint initiatives and the management of this area, diaspora migration and development. We'd like to welcome the call on the importance of the roadmap in line with the objectives of the National Development Agency Moldova 2030, and in particular of supporting the government and the authorities of the Republic of Moldova by scaling up the joint efforts of response to the needs for social economic redress and ensuring efficient governance and inclusive one by using and also benefiting of the migration, return and reintegration, climate changes to direct the Republic of Moldova towards sustainable development. These aspects get a special connotation in the post-COVID era, and the roadmap together with the joint program that is going to be developed seems to be a mechanism important for prompt action against this long-term, mid-term impact of the pandemic on the above-mentioned areas. It is also worth mentioning that this document represents the result of a very comprehensive process of consultation with the participation of different parties involved, the civil society, representatives of the diaspora, and the hometown associations, development partners, state institutions. And in this context, we do appreciate, first of all, the engagement of our citizens from abroad in order to identify the needs and the most optimal mechanisms for settlement. And we are also welcoming the interest of the donors, of the organizers, and the international financial institutions, the academia, the organizations for migration, representatives of the private sector, in all regards the support for the implementation for the achievement of those 5 pillars of the roadmap and the identified skills. Thus, we do count very much on establishing a multilateral framework for cooperation in all regards the processing of migration data strengthening the networks of migrants in civic engagement in the decision-making process, entrepreneurial development, giving an impulse to the financial investments of the diaspora in the national economy of the country, governance, mobility of labor force, promotion of the return and reintegration of migrants, engaging the migrants in resilience, climate resilience, economic resilience activities, and so on. Thus, I would like to thank you for your attention and wish you an activity full of fruitful deliberations during the dialogue. Oksana, please. I will stay here during the day together with you, and I'm ready to answer according to any potential questions related to diaspora migration and development, as well as related to the topics discussed today.
Mulțumim mult, dragă Nadezhda. Thank you very much for this intervention, but also for being always so open to all the ideas and the proposals that came, and for being so supportive. Without the ownership and commitment of the government, none of this was possible. Thank you very much again. It is further my pleasure to give the floor to Ms. Caroline Tissot, the Director of Cooperation of the Swiss Cooperation Office in Moldova. SDC, as you know, is one of the most active supporters of migration and development globally, but also in Moldova. With the continuous support of SDC, Moldova is now one of the best practices in the world, harnessing migration for local development. And we thank you for that. Ms. Caroline, the screen is all yours.
Bună ziua tuturor! It's a pleasure to be today with you for the launch of this roadmap between IOM and UNDP. But I would like to say that the roadmap between UNDP and IOM is not only a UN roadmap, but actually it can inspire all of us. And we're very happy to be associated to that. As you have mentioned, Oksana, Switzerland has been involved in migration and development for a long while, and globally and also in Moldova. We can be very proud of many of the results we had together, and many of these results were already mentioned. If I'm looking back in 2011, when actually we started to be globally involved in migration and development, and at that time it was quite innovative. It was also quite risky. Okay. I hear another person talking at the same time in the micro. Anyway, so I think this initiative, and UNDP and IOM were from the very beginning very well associated. They were really at the core of this innovation in terms of migration and development. And since then, I've seen this partnership evolve in such a good way that it's really very encouraging. And also in the spirit of the UN reform, it's very good to see these two organizations working so well together and proposing to us this roadmap, which will be associated with. You know, I could quote actually quite a lot of results at the global level, but that's not the point. And plus, you know, so much has already been said that it's quite challenging to take the floor after so many brilliant and longer explanations about the roadmap and about migration and development. One of the things that Mr. Prentice said, which is very important, that we always have to remind ourselves, is that all this matters only if it has an impact on the local level for people. I mean, we're not working for statistics, we're working for people. So that's really the big challenge, to demonstrate the approach, demonstrate the project we're doing, that it has an impact for people. And I think here, we just mentioned, it was already said actually because of DAR 1+3, the governmental program, which is based also on what we had implemented with UNDP, this matching grants with local communities, the diaspora, governments, and ourselves, which had excellent results. You can go around Moldova and test honey or sleep in a pension or meet really people that have made very good use of these grants, and we can be very proud of that. We can also be very proud of that, and you mentioned that, Oksana, that the model of hometown association was actually taken up internationally as a model. And also what we can be proud of is that this hometown association, which were created with our support, many more have been created without our support, which means that actually this model makes sense for local communities. We also worked very hard on strengthening the local public authority to be able to engage with the diaspora migrant and to actually be of service to their citizens. And that is also something that we need to continue. It was mentioned by someone that the cross-cutting nature of migration, and for us, for Switzerland in Moldova, it's really, we take that very much to our heart. Within the local governance program, within health interventions, we always look at these issues related to diaspora engagement, to migration, and that's very important to us. And for the future, I think it's going to be really the approach. One thing also I would like to stress is that, you know, migrants and diaspora, we look at everybody in Moldova as partners. I mean, be it diaspora, migrants, local residents, whoever, we all actually partnering to get a better development condition in Moldova. And I don't really like to separate like people in different categories. Everybody's needed. It's a collective effort, and that's very important that we actually make sure that there's an inclusive effort and that everybody has its say. A lot was done in Moldova to integrate the diaspora into the making of the development plans, into you know, all these issues were well taken into consideration. That's good, but we actually probably need to do even better in the future. And this is you know, the detailed presentation of the roadmap showed that there's lots of avenues to do better. Mention was skills, for instance. Indeed, not for people to emigrate, but you know, for people staying here, but also if they emigrate, to emigrate with better chances to get a good job abroad. That's you know, you take your skills with you, so it's never a lost investment. Education. That's interesting. There's also the question of investment facilities, and that will require probably some reforms and some new legislative piece to make the framework more conducive for investment. That's important, and also a different level, you know, large investment, but also for SMEs and small initiatives. So with that, I don't want to make a longer speech, but at the end, I would really want to express my gratitude to all the partners, you know, for your organization, Lars, your organization, DIMA. It's a pleasure to work together on this aspect. Also, really a great thank you to the diaspora and the migrants and the local public authorities, to the BRD, for the very good collective partnership that we have. And that's a pleasure. It gives results, and we should really continue working that way. Partnership is really important in that regard. So thank you very much for that, and looking forward to continue working with all of you in the future. Over to you, Oksana.
Thank you very much, dear Ms. Tissot, and thank you very much for highlighting once again the importance of sustainability of efforts. Indeed, it is amazing to see that after the project was implemented, both the donors and the implementing agencies can step back and enjoy to see how the hometown associations, but also other efforts, continue their work without the intervention of both agencies. Thank you very much for that. And further on, allow me to give the floor to Mr. Gintautas Baranauskas. I hope I pronounced that correctly, and apologize if that is not like that. Deputy Head of the Operations Section, Delegation of the European Union to the Republic of Moldova. I would like to also mention that EU was one of the donors that supported the work on migration in the country, a work that made it possible today to build the capacities of the national actors to properly attract remittances into the national economy throughout the PARI 1+1 program, but not only that, and raise awareness on the topic among migrants. EU probably was one of the donors that was at the beginning of this process, and we highly appreciate all that. Dear Mr. Baranauskas, the floor is all yours.
Yes, thank you very much. And I would like to thank all the partners for inviting, for organizing this seminar, and for inviting the delegation of the EU to the Republic of Moldova to this policy seminar on the occasion of International Remittances Day, which offers us opportunity to reflect together on the critical contributions that migration provides to the sustainable development that all of us international and national stakeholders are fully committed to in our respective capacities. So sincere thanks to UNDP and IOM, which are entities with whom the EU has been successfully cooperating for many years around these and other topics. for providing us an overview of the joint roadmap for cooperation on migration and sustainable development in the Republic of Moldova. We congratulate you and with the international authorities of Moldova to join forces in the area of migration in the country. As our speakers have already mentioned, and other panelists will further elaborate, in the workshops after the plenary, it is clear that the Republic of Moldova faces important outbound migration fluxes, which entails threats as well as opportunities. Demographic decrease and with the brain drain, if incentivizing policies for return and reintegration are not applied. According to the United Nations Population Fund, unless the demographic trends change rapidly, by 2035, the population of the country could fall to 2 million, and 1 person out of 3 would be over 60 years of age. Among the opportunities, there is an outstanding potential for partnership schemes in a variety of sectors for the mutual benefit of the countries of origin and destination of the migrants. It is in the light that I believe the seminar today is particularly relevant for our objective to support the economic development of the Republic of Moldova. The European Union, as per the principles expressed in the Migration and Asylum Pact adopted in 2020, is fully consistent that migration is a global phenomenon and requires global solutions and responsibility sharing. No country can effectively manage migration on its own. The EU is therefore supportive of collaborative approaches to manage migration in partnership with countries and regions, as well as international organizations and at multilateral level. In the Eastern Partnership region in particular, the EU approach to migration builds on achievements and success stories of the past. In this respect, it is perhaps meaningful to recall the important regulatory steps to manage the phenomenon and reduce illegal migration that have been implemented through the visa liberalization process between Moldova and the countries of the Schengen area in the recent years. The visa-free regime with the Republic of Moldova, which came into effect in April 2014, has brought important benefits for the country. More than 2.5 million Moldovan citizens have made more than 7 million trips to the Schengen area. Also, it has been acknowledged that by far the most of migration to the EU from neighboring countries of the Eastern Partnership is legal migration. This offers benefits for countries of origin, transit and destination alike, as well as for the migrants themselves. Opportunities of talent partnership and labor migration of mutual interest have an enormous potential, which is still only partly exploited. Clearly, every country has its own situation, its own concerns, and its own opportunities. There is no one-size-fits-it-all, but rather a tailor-made approach. The main drivers in the EU cooperation with the Republic of Moldova in the area of migration include addressing the root causes of migration by improving the economic opportunities and alleviating the impact of COVID-19 crisis, protect the human rights of migrants and fight criminal networks behind migrant smuggling and human trafficking, as well as helping to promote border management, promoting legal pathways to the EU through this visa facilitation and mobility schemes, and improving legal and secular migration, improving return and readmission and sustainable reintegration. We are in the process under the Neighborhood Development and International Cooperation Instrument, which was adopted in 2021 as the main financial tool to support external actions during the next multi-annual financial framework in 21-27. At global level, a significant share of this instrument is earmarked for migration-related actions. The NDC regulation envisages the creation of migration programs in specific regions, whose priorities and actions will be complemented by the regular bilateral and regional programs. Hence, bilateral and regional programs will envisage specific migration-related actions or integrate any aspect of migration into socio-economic development policies and across various sectoral policies, such as those indicated as priorities by the joint communication on the Eastern Partnership beyond 2020. In general, mainstreaming migration has been part of migration policy for over a decade and has gained political impetus with the UN 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, especially in view of implementing the Sustainable Development Goals. The EU's Pact on Migration and Asylum calls for a holistic approach to migration, emphasizing the relevance of including migration across sectors in the EU external action. This holistic approach will continue and will be supplemented in the upcoming years with enhanced support to diaspora engagement, support to effective integration policies of returning migrants, also framed into broader socio-economic recovery plans and programs to incentivize investments from remittances. Thank you all once again for having me and other colleagues from the EU delegation here today. We are looking forward to exploring our opportunities for further collaboration. I wish fruitful discussions today and best of luck for all of us for our future endeavors in the area of migration. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Baranauskas. I apologize for pronouncing your name that way. I hope it is correct. Thank you very much for your speech, and thank you very much for highlighting again the priorities of the EU in the field of migration in general. And I couldn't not notice the fact that they're basically aligned very much with the approach that was presented by Daniel earlier in the UNDP-IOM joint roadmap, in the 5 pillars that were presented a bit earlier. And we think it is a very good sign and probably provides a lot of further potential for cooperation between the EU and the agency that will be implementing this roadmap. Thank you very much for your intervention. And with this being said, dear ladies and gentlemen, allow me to invite you to our next session, to invite you to the panel discussion. Let us all step into the first panel discussion, which will be about evidence, root causes on migration, and diaspora outreach. I would like to highlight several points before giving the speech to our moderators. And first of all, I would like to mention that this session will last 40 minutes. It will be moderated by Mr. David Couture, Human Mobility Advisor within the Recovery Solution and Human Mobility team of the UNDP Crisis Bureau. But before we proceed to the actual speeches, I would like to remind you that this event is live streaming on Facebook pages of UNDP and IOM Moldova, on Privesc EU in Romanian, and on UNDP YouTube channel in English. Please note, again, that we will be taking questions and forwarding them to the panelists in the facilitated discussion session. So please make sure if you have a question to one of our speakers or panelists or regarding the previous presentation that was made, please submit your question in the questions and answers section. Not forgetting to mention who is addressing the question and to whom it is addressed, so that we make sure that these questions are well taken and answers. With this being said, I would like to give the floor to Mr. David Couture for moderating the next speech. Dear David, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Oksana, and hello, everybody. I'm very happy to be here. I'm David Couture. I work as a Human Mobility Advisor at UNDP in the Crisis Bureau in New York, and I am very pleased to moderate this session. I understand that my main role is not to be here as a migration expert, but just to keep time. At least this is what the organizers told me. You have to be very strict with the time. So I will try to do that. I am very honored to have to moderate this session on evidence, root causes, and diaspora outreach. Of course, we need data, and this has been very clear in Daniel Nojok's excellent presentation. And it's very important for IOM and UNDP to work on this evidence, and also to address, I don't know how yet, but I hope the speakers will have good hints on how to address the root causes of migration, and also how to have a better diaspora outreach. So I don't want to take too much time because we want to hear the speakers. We will have Miss Kathleen Newland, who is a very well-known migration expert. She's a senior fellow, and she is the co-founder of the Migration Policy Institute in Washington, D.C. And then we will have, after Kathleen's keynote presentation, we will have 3 panelists. Mrs. Nadeja Zubko, who is the director of the Moldovan Diaspora Relations Bureau. We will also have Mrs. Aurelia Spataru, who is the Deputy General Director of the National Bureau of Statistics. And I am sure that she will talk about data. And we will have Mr. Bensley, who is a UNDP colleague and acting as senior advisor at our Istanbul regional hub for Europe and Central Asia. So now I would like to give the floor to Kathleen Newland, who is going to make a keynote presentation. Kathleen, the floor is yours. And you are muted.
Thank you, David. And thank you very much to the organizers of this session. It's really a huge pleasure for me to be here and to reconnect with colleagues in Moldova. We have 3 huge topics to cover in this very brief panel, as David mentioned, evidence, root causes, and diaspora outreach. So I will have time only to make a few points about each of those topics. And let me plunge in with evidence. Good policy cannot easily be made in the dark. And it's evidence that, solid evidence, that illuminates the path for diaspora engagement. The emphasis is very often on hard data, but it's also important to take account of qualitative observations about the behavior of the diaspora and their interactions with their countries and local communities, including governments at all levels. Moldova's National Bureau of Statistics collects data on what's happening within Moldova and how interactions with the diaspora affect the conditions of life for Moldovan households that have a member abroad. And I hope Ms. Spataru later in this panel will be able to share some insights from this work, and particularly to let us know whether she's seen changes in the past years over in how diaspora, having a member of the household in the diaspora affects conditions at home. Evidence on the activities of the diaspora abroad is very weak, and it's not easy to gather it. For one thing, diasporas are primarily self-defined, so it's the willingness of someone who is living abroad to engage with their country, to take a continuing interest in their country of origin that really in a way defines an active member of the diaspora. And identifying those people, the active members of the diaspora, those who are willing to take action, has often required and continues to require innovative ways of identifying them. And we've seen interesting examples of that from around the world. Of course, diaspora organizations abroad have an extremely important role to play in putting their members in contact with those who are working on development in the countries of origin. But we've also seen innovative government efforts in other places. I've always been particularly attracted by the program in New Zealand, in which the government agency that interacts with diasporas has put up a global map in which members of the diaspora can visit the site and register their presence. And these show up as stars on the map. So you see where the clusters of stars are, where the members of the diaspora congregate and have particularly dense population. So it's innovative ways of identifying members of the diaspora of that kind that really are important for government agencies to be able to identify those who are willing to engage. On root causes, I think about what Leo Tolstoy said, that all happy families are alike, but each unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. That's not to imply that diasporas are unhappy, but simply that every diaspora has its own set of root causes for why people have decided to leave the country. There's a tendency to focus on the economic causes, poverty, low incomes, lack of jobs. The economic causes are easier to focus on, easier to quantify, often, I think, easier for the members of the diaspora to articulate. But it's extremely important to keep in mind also the non-economic root causes, which are equally and sometimes even more important than those feelings of personal safety, hope for their own personal futures, faith in the future of the country, trust in partners, especially in national and local governments. These more intangible factors are absolutely critical for governments, for civil society organizations to try to figure out and respond to. And I hope that Mr. Ben Slay, Senior Advisor to UNDP's Regional Hub for Europe and Central Asia, may be willing to give us some comparative perspective on what he has observed in the region on cooperation between diaspora communities and governments. Moving to diaspora outreach, almost 10 years ago, I had the privilege of working with a great team of people in Moldova, including some of those who are with us today. Oksana, it's wonderful to see you again, and Gennady Cretu from the IOM office in Moldova, and others were extremely important partners who were sort of present at the creation of the Diaspora Relations Bureau. It gives me great pleasure to see that the Bureau is still a central element of Moldova's diaspora policies and programs. The Bureau has established many programs, and I am sure Ms. Zubko will give us more detail on those. They have taken lessons from the experiences of other countries. 10 years ago, almost 10 years ago, we had a study tour to Ireland, one of the most successful countries in maintaining close relations with their diasporas. And I think that was, an inspiration for some programs that persist to this day in Moldova. And there have been many other examples, some of which we've heard about already today with hometown associations and matching grants and so on. The Bureau has also helped to devise approaches that are unique to Moldova and its particular structures. I look forward to hearing more about the Bureau's activities and its plans going forward to respond, as always, to changing and challenging circumstances. It's always supremely important for diaspora outreach to be nimble, responsive to a dynamic context. The COVID-19 pandemic has given us a most sobering example of this. All over the world, diaspora communities have responded to the needs of their countries and communities. From family remittances, for example, which we're particularly honoring today, did not fall nearly as much as they were expected to. And indeed, in some countries, they have even risen during the course of the pandemic, recognizing the extraordinary needs of families and communities in the country of origin. Diaspora outreach efforts need to be constantly assessing their activities, what's working, what's not. They need to evaluate, and I don't mean sort of formal bureaucratic evaluations, but just constantly looking at the results of their programs and whether they're being effective, whether they are, as Ms. Tissot emphasized, really making a difference in the lives of people. It's important also that both governments and development partners take a long view, and I'll join the long line of people giving a shout out to the Swiss Development Cooperation, which has been in this space for more than a decade. Change takes time. There'll be bumps on the road, there'll be setbacks along with progress. So national agencies need to be persistent. Development partners need to be patient and stay in this space for the long haul. Thank you, David.
Thanks, Kathleen. As always, very interesting and intellectually challenging presentation. I think that because of the time, I will give the floor immediately to our following panelists. Mrs. Nadeja Zubko, who is the director of the Moldovan Diaspora Relations Bureau. The floor is yours and you have 5 minutes, please.
Good day. Thank you very much for this intervention, for the fact of providing to me the possibility to intervene in a free form with my speech. Indeed, the BRD has been established with the support of the development partners, and I'm talking about IOM, and as well with the support to develop programs from UNDP and from the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation. As a priority for 2021, I would like just to mention that we envisage, with the support of the project of migration and local development, to promote at the level of the government a government decision, which is going to provide support to the citizens of the Republic of Moldova, those who have returned from abroad, a support for reintegration. I'm talking about an action plan at the national level for a period of time of 5 years. At the same time, in August, we would like to launch a communication platform. And here I would like to refer to Mrs. Newland, because she has talked about a very successful and innovative example of Finland that has created a platform, the possibility to get registered and also to have a database of diaspora. That we are now in the process of finalizing a platform which is going also to provide a possibility to get registered for the Diaspora Association, for local people association, also for different centers from diaspora, and most importantly, there will be a possibility to get registered on this interactive map for individuals, which is going to contribute indirectly to the development of a database. At the same time, I would like to mention that during the summertime, our bureau is organizing different programs that are meant for diaspora. These are government programs. This would be the Days of Diaspora and the Conference of Diaspora. That is going to be a platform of dialogue that is going to be organized in August on the platform between government and diaspora. As well, we have a program meant for the children from diaspora. This is a program which, just like the Congress and the Days of Diaspora, is going to be carried out in online format due to the realities provoked by the pandemic of COVID-19. At the same time, I would like to mention about the different other programs. This would be the DAR program that has been referred already to, DAR 1+3 as well. For 2021, we envisage to finance 21 local public authorities for projects of local development with the involvement of diaspora directly, so as to harness human potential. And this would be for 5 million lei. As well, we have the project Diaspora Engagement Hub, a small grant project that has a big success and has been implemented since 2016, has been developed by the colleagues from BRD with the support of IOM and with the financial support of the Swiss agency. So Diaspora Engagement Hub since 2020 represents a program which is financed already from the state budget, which we envisage to continue for a long period of time. So since 2022, we envisage for this program to be fully financed from the state budget. So this would be the priorities for 2021. And if you think that I should add something to what I have just mentioned, just tell me. But it seems to me that I have covered everything that you have referred to.
Thanks, Mrs. Suko, and thanks for being so clear with your priorities. I guess that we will have some time after all the presentation to come back on that and have some interaction. So I would like now to give the floor to Mrs. Aurelia Spataru, who is the Deputy General Director of the National Bureau of Statistics. Mrs. Spataru, the floor is yours.
Hello to everyone. Thank you very much. Bună ziua, stimate doamne, stimați domni.
Good day, dear ladies and gentlemen. Actually, I would like to speak in my welcome speech from behalf of the National Bureau of Statistics about the statistical data that we are collecting, that we are producing, and that we are disseminating. In this respect, I would like to mention and I would like to refer to the statistics on migration. You all know probably that there are different sources to produce this kind of statistics, and one of the sources would be the population and dwelling census. Another source would be the selective research and study service in households, and third source would be the public registers, based on which the migration statistics is produced. In relation to the activity of the National Bureau of Statistics, I would like to mention that annually the Bureau is estimating the number of international migration. If until 2018, NBS was producing and disseminating statistical data regarding international migration only based on data provided by the entities who are responsible for record keeping of immigrants and immigrants. And I mean over here the Public Services Agency with the data in relation to the citizens of the Republic of Moldova who have left abroad, and a Bureau of Migration and Asylum with the data for the foreigners, the stateless persons, and those who are requesting asylum. But those data were not according to the UN recommendations. And with the support of our development partners, IOM, UNDP, and the Swiss Agency for Cooperation and Development, starting with 2018, we made it possible to access data, anonymized data regarding the state border crossings by individuals. So these are data that are held by the State Inspectorate of Border Police, and based on this data, now we are able to estimate international migration on annual basis. And actually in this calculation, we implement the international definitions of immigrant and immigrant as well. These data are being estimated, used for estimating the data on the population with ordinary residents. It's an international definition that NBS tried to implement in its activity. The availability of data In relation to the state border crossing, I would like to mention that the Republic of Moldova was somehow remarked by the fact that it has access to such data, because this is not so frequently heard in the experience of other National Bureau of Statistics. So, for the time being, this data provides to us a possibility to calculate the international immigration and the population with ordinary residents at the national level with disaggregation by sex and age. Currently, together with the Agency of the Public Services, we try our best to enhance our joint efforts so as to have access to data with personal nature or personal data, so as to be able also to produce data on the population with ordinary residents from the national perspective. So if we're using about the use of administrative sources, we would like to say that there is a challenge from the National Bureau of Statistics in relation to the content of this data, because we don't know so much information about the level of quality, of coverage of this data, of overlapping of this data, but also many other aspects that are so important for the quality of data that a Bureau of Statistics has to take into consideration and has to apply to the official statistical product. The second source, the population census. Yes, indeed, it provides reliable data regarding the stocks of immigrants from the country. But at the same time, this census is not providing data on the stocks of immigrants from abroad, because the immigrants are not part of the population that is object of this census. From the perspective of the census, the biggest challenges would be the need to access the sources of administrative data, because probably many of you know that the future of the census would be for the fact that for this to be carried out and for this to be implemented based on public registers. And this is not yet the case for the Republic of Moldova. And we really hope that the authorities that are holding these public registers are going to be open to us for us to explore this possibility in future. Now, in relation to the household-based surveys, statistical surveys, this aspect, I would like to mention that we have the household budget survey, and I would like just to provide to you some data regarding the subject of the event of today. So I would like to mention that according to HBS, the share of the households with migrants would be of 14% in 2019, and over the last years, it has been increased. The same increasing trend is being registered as well for the share of the households that are receiving remittances from abroad. As well, the share of remittances in the available income of the households with migrants, meaning that those households that are dependent on remittances, is 44%. And this is a decrease as compared to the last year. At the same time, for comparison purposes, the share of remittances in the available income of the households without migrants is just 9%. So I would like also to mention that all in all, the available income of the households with migrants, the share of income from salaries is only 27%, while in households without migrants, it's over a half. That is of the income of that household that comes from the salary. As for the consumption expenditures of the households with migrants, I would like to note that these are a little bit smaller as compared to the households without migrants. But at the same time, some specific peculiarities in this respect would be the fact that in the consumption expenditures of the households with migrants, the cost for maintenance of dwelling, for equipping the dwelling and communication are much higher than in case of the households without migrants. And this probably is logic from your perspective. The challenge in relation to use of data from the household-based surveys is related to the fact that we have some restrictions or limitations in the methodology from the perspective of the representative needs of the households with migrants in the population that is being extracted within the statistical samples. And unfortunately, we still have some problems in relation to the response rate of the population. The population is more and more reticent so to participate in NBS surveys. And from this point of view, I would like to come up with a call upon you, upon all those who are listening to us. Please be part of the service. Please participate in production of statistics because they are about us and for us. As well, from time to time, NBS has also carried out some specific surveys only on migration, but this has been long ago and probably it will be high time to repeat this kind of surveys. If talking about statistics on diaspora, I would like to mention that we have had such kind of requests coming to our bureau wherever we are requested to carry out the so-called census of diaspora. But unfortunately, I have to tell you that we didn't identify any international standards in relation to statistical measurement of diaspora, measuring diaspora in official statistics. From this point of view, I would like to mention that for producing statistics about the citizens of the Republic of Moldova from the territory of other countries.
We are short of time. Sorry about that. Thanks.
My idea, because I think it would be the core of my message. Deci pentru a produce date despre cetățenii.
In order to produce data on diaspora about the citizens of the Republic of Moldova from abroad, I would like to say that it's necessary to have access, increased access to sources of administrative data, especially registers that are record-keeping this population, is documenting this population. Also, we need agreement of data exchange between the Republic of Moldova and other states. And these agreements are necessary so as to use the statistics produced by the other states. Unfortunately, we don't know about the existence of such kind of agreements, and also it's necessary to establish a partnership, different partnership with researchers, especially because in relation to statistics about diaspora, we have to enhance the efforts of researchers, of the authorities responsible for policies supporting diaspora, as well as many other authorities and from the other states, so as to provide to us this data for us to analyze them. I would like to thank the organizers for this event, and I would like to congratulate all of you for the relevance of the specific event in the context of our country, of the Republic of Moldova, because migration, diaspora, and all the problems related to and felt by the population indeed should be cared about the state, and we really hope that the data that we are going to produce in future, inclusively with your support, are going to be useful. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much for this very rich intervention. As an economist, I'm always excited when I hear talking about data, and I think that we have so much to learn from the experience of Moldova. So thanks for sharing that. We are running super late. So I will give the floor now to my colleague Bensley from the Istanbul UNDP Regional Hub. And please, Ben, if you could stick to the 5 minutes, that would be great.
Thank you very much, David. Mulțumesc. It's a pleasure and honor to be here participating in this meeting. I will do my best to speak in less than 5 minutes. I would like to take a regional perspective to the issues that are being addressed, reflecting the fact that our piece of UNDP, the Regional Bureau for Europe and Central Asia, works broadly across the middle income countries of the region, in which issues of migration and remittances and mobility are critical development questions. In terms of the issues in particular I was asked to address, One of them are the different roles governments play in diaspora outreach. And here I think it's fair to say that we should differentiate between longer term as opposed to shorter term roles and trends. In the longer term, I think it's fair to say that across the region, we see a growing interest in best practices in migration for development, including outreach to the diaspora. This reflects a number of factors, including the growth and consolidation of labor migration and associated diasporas, the transformation of labor migration movements from, one might say, the post-Soviet or post-Yugoslav periods of refugee movements after the collapse of the socialist federation towards more standard patterns of circular migration and other forms of economic migration. We also see governments increasingly transitioning from a view that sees labor migrants as a lost labor force, lost human capital, to views that migrants are closely linked to diasporas and diasporas are resources to be tapped. The question is how to do that. I think the lessons learned from the countries that have joined the European Union, such as Romania, Poland, Hungary, Slovakia, are quite influential here because many countries have seen diaspora return after not only accession, but after economic growth, a certain level of prosperity is reached, and many migrants see that they can bring back skills, human and financial capital to their original home countries, have a good quality of life, and enrich their countries in the process. I think it's also important to point out that we really face different kinds of, if we like, trends, depending on which parts of the world we're looking at. In particular, some of the countries of the region are showing growing interest in immigration. The phenomenon of so-called digital nomads, of people who can work anywhere with their laptops, attracting them to come to your country to stay, is an increasing matter of increasing interest in a number of countries of the region. Now, those are longer-term trends. If we focus on the short term, we have to talk about the impact of the pandemic. And traditional views about the roles of migrants and migration and development in 2020, I think, faced new realities where labor migrants seem to imply new challenges. Sometimes these were people who were trapped in the countries of destination and needed to be rescued, or people who wanted to get back to where they were supposed to be working and were unable to. In some countries, migrants were even seen as vectors of infection for the pandemic and were victims of various forms of discrimination, or at least not official discrimination, of course, but just broader social discrimination and various forms of stigma. What we also saw is that in these countries where labor migrants were trapped or faced various problems, that diasporas generally or often tended to emerge as more stable sources of remittances and an element of stability in the relationship with host governments. Now, hopefully, as vaccinations get rolled out across the region, we'll be able to transition from the short-term trends affecting migration back to longer-term development dynamics. A second question concerns effective practices in diaspora outreach I would like to briefly touch on. And here I think it's interesting to note that we, in the different sub-regions in which our regional bureau works, we tend to see a single country that has taken the lead and other countries have tended to follow that. In the Western Balkans, Albania was the country that first really tried to reach out to its diaspora and establish longer-term relationships with the state and the diaspora. In the countries that fall under the Eastern Partnership framework, of course, it's Moldova that has taken the lead in this respect. In the South Caucasus, it's Armenia with its long history of diaspora engagement that's played this role. And in Central Asia, it's been Kyrgyzstan that has been most active in reaching out to its diaspora and making this a central element of the migration for development policies of the government. And finally, I was asked to briefly talk about whether the main causes of immigration are related to how active diasporas are in national development efforts. And I think when we look at these countries, diasporas really aren't a cause of either immigration or the role that immigration plays in national development policies. Migration happens from these countries for the same reasons it happens pretty much everywhere. Push and pull factors, poverty, bad governance, etc. But nonetheless, there's an increasing recognition that diasporas can promote sustainable development and an increasing willingness to put migration management policies at the center of national development strategies. And what is, I think, most important that we're seeing is that it's engagement with diasporas that make possible returns when problems of bad governance and poverty are attenuated. And by returns, we don't mean only people, but also the skills, the capital, human and financial, and others that they bring with them. So conscious of the time constraint, David, please let me conclude here. Thank you very much again for the opportunity. Mulțumesc, la revedere.
Thanks so much, Ben, for this wonderful regional overview. I think it was very complimentary of the Moldovan perspectives, and thanks for that. We don't have much time, but I still would like to have some quick interaction with the floor. I don't know if we have questions from the other panelists who are not in this session or who are in this session, or from the different attendees. Please raise your hand, turn on your camera, and feel free to ask questions. I have one question actually, because one of the pillars of this joint strategy is about the root causes. It's part of the discussions. I would like to know from the Moldovan perspective if this is really an issue for you. If you think that addressing the adverse drivers of migration is something that you consider as a priority, or at the end you consider that this is an opportunity, this huge diaspora you have is contributing, and therefore you are not too concerned by the topic of the root causes. I don't know if one of the Moldovan panelists would like to reply to that, while other colleagues want to jump in to have other questions. So I don't know, Mrs. Zupko, Mrs. Spataru, if you want to reply to that, or that's too sensitive.
Thank you very much for this question. Yes, indeed. This kind of approach represents also an opportunity, but also is a priority at the national level, because our diaspora remains to be a potential which can be used, may be used, and there is room still to be used as well. I would like to say that our diaspora is rather open. They get engaged in development of programs at the national level, at the local level, and I think that my colleagues from UNDP can intervene over here so as to present their results at the local level. I just can mention about the program of program DAR 1+3 that is very efficient, and at the same time I can mention that diaspora is somehow diverse. The results of engagement of diaspora, as being mentioned already, are mainly seen at the local level, because we see the psychological link with the place from where the person has left, and that's why it's easier to get engaged over there. The program of involvement of diaspora at the local level are easier. Nevertheless, diaspora is open and gets involved in development of public policies, as well would like to be a member in different working groups. And I'm talking about organization of events at national level. I'm talking about different public policies, and also it's very sensitive, but also comes up with very tough replies whenever we at the institutional level are tackling a subject that maybe over the time is going to have a rather sensitive impact and result for diaspora, and sometimes might place it in some discriminatory situation. That is why diaspora remains to be a power at the state level, a power that still has to be discovered, and the very last steps and approaches from diaspora show that diaspora is a real power, including for the Republic of Moldova.
Thanks, Ms. Zubko. I see that Kathleen has her hand raised. So Kathleen, can you please react to that? And you are still muted.
No,
now you can talk.
Just trying to unmute myself. Thank you. I think my question is also for Ms. Zubko, and I was very excited to hear about the plans that the Diaspora Bureau has for new programs and the innovative ways of making contact with the diaspora. But the question that I have is back when I was working in Moldova more intensely, there was quite a divergence between the diaspora that was mostly present in the Russian Federation and the diaspora that is mostly present in Europe. And I wanted to know if, first of all, if you've seen any convergence, but also if you have found it useful to have if these different populations have different priorities, and if you've found it useful to have sort of different approaches to those who are in the Russian Federation and those who are in Western Europe. Thanks.
Thanks, Kathleen. Does someone want to reply to that?
Thank you. I do understand that actually this question comes to me as well. So indeed, it is said and it is mentioned that there is a difference between the diaspora in the Russian Federation and the diaspora from the Eastern Europe. Here in BRD, we understood that diaspora shouldn't be divided. Diaspora should be harnessed as a human potential, as a resource, which is still not fully discovered. We're talking here about two destinations in which indeed we have a huge number of the citizens of the Republic of Moldova being established in this region. And what determines our citizens to go to these regions would be the language, because the majority of the languages of the European states are focused on the Latin language, just Romanian language that is spoken in the Republic of Moldova, while in the Russian Federation is the Russian language that is also spoken in the Republic of Moldova. That is why people are easier getting integrated in the Russian Federation. So based on the fact that we have as well the same values, cultural values, at the level of the state, there have remained some influences that have been preserved, and thus our citizens are getting integrated very easily. As a new phenomenon, I can mention that our citizens do not focus on the destination of the Russian Federation anymore. So our citizens already are focused more on the European states. They are getting concentrated over there. This decision has been determined probably also by the modifications in the normative framework of the Russian Federation, which somehow provide to them impossibility to obtain a status legal status over there. And even if they get a status of legal state on the territory of that state, it's rather complicated to maintain it as compared to the benefits that they receive over there. Talking about the cultural perspectives, as I have mentioned at the very beginning, I don't see any difference between the cultural activities that are being organized by the diaspora associations in the Russian Federation and those that are being organized in Europe. Moreover, the Bureau is supporting the establishment of the educational diaspora centers. This is a very good program in our vision. Last year, that has been launched such kind of a center on the territory of the Russian Federation. It was missing until then. So the associations were organizing some classes of Romanian language, but those classes have been focused more on the cultural aspect. While now things are already more organized, meaning that persons who have been established in the Russian Federation get involved, get engaged in the associations and these centers, just like the citizens who got established in other destinations. Thank you.
Thanks, Mrs. Suko, again for your intervention. I think we are going to finalize this panel. It was very interesting. I think we also entered very much into already the discussion of the next panel on precisely the contribution of diasporas. So I give the floor back to Oksana, and thanks again for this excellent discussion.
Thank you very much, dear David. What an interesting and captivating session. I am pretty sure if we had 2 more hours, we could discuss about that. And I'm pretty sure there are much more questions to discuss. We hope there will be other occasions for that. Thank you to the speakers. And since we are observing the International Day of Family Remittances, it is my pleasure to invite you to all step into the second panel of discussion about remittances, diaspora investment, migration, and climate change. The session will last 40 minutes. Will be moderated by Mr. Vladislav Kaim, UN Secretary General's Youth Advisor on Climate Change. But before I would like to give the floor to Mr. Kaim, I would like to remind you that each speaker will have 5 minutes to intervene so that we have enough time to finish with the final session on the conclusions. And if there are any questions from the people watching us online, please make sure you leave them in the questions and answer section. Thank you very much. Dear Mr. Kaim, the floor is all yours.
Thank you very much, Oksana. Good afternoon, everyone, and happy International Remittances Day. It is a great pleasure for me to be moderating the panel 2 at this launch event dedicated to remittances and diaspora investments. The discussion in this session will focus on global remittance trends and specifically over the commitment to resilience and pointing to migrant remitting behavior and the significance of it for the developing countries, of which Moldova is a perfect example. And we are looking forward to hear from our panelists their perspectives on how to leverage the flows during the slow economic recovery while the flows continue to grow. We are looking forward for comments and reflections on the ways for deepening financial inclusion through remittances, investing in modernizing the saving and credit associations, as well as advancing investments in philanthropy in the areas related to strengthening environmental protection programs. With that, I would like, without further ado, since we are somewhat pressed on time, to invite to the floor the keynote speaker for this panel, Mr. Manuel Orozco, Director of the Center for Migration and Economic Stabilization at Creative Associates International. Mr. Orozco, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good day to everyone, and thank you for inviting me. I think, first of all, congratulations on this initiative of UNDP and IOM on the multi-year roadmap for cooperation. It's definitely an important step forward on the issue of migration and development. I'm going to focus my thoughts, my reflections on this issue on 3 main questions. Number 1 is what explains the growth of global flows of remittances. Number 2, what are the implications and significance for developing countries, especially for countries like Moldova? And 3, what's next? see what needs to be done. And these three issues definitely connect precisely to this roadmap. From a development programmatic perspective, it's really important to keep three considerations in mind, proportionality being one, scale number two, and have a very strong sense of the impact that these flows have in the local economies. Having said that, we know that the flows of remittances at the global scale basically did not register growth in the context where other macroeconomic indicators had negative growth. Tourism, for example, had negative 60% or more decline, only registered the growth from January to March or April of 2020. Trade dropped significantly to more than 10% in many countries around the world, whereas remittances even registered positive growth in several places. What is important about this is to understand that basically there are significant lessons learned of migrants from the global 2009 recession that led them to be better prepared to deal with potential crises that will come. No one was expecting that 10 years later there will be a major crisis such as the pandemic, but it caught the immigrants better prepared for whatever contingency there will be. And this one happened and allowed them to have a very important stock of savings. Our research shows that migrants 10 years later in 2020 had an increase in savings that was 30% higher than what it was in 2009. But also another important element is that they also reprioritize remittances as one of the top 4 most important financial obligations. Basically, after housing, food, and regular bills, remittances came forth as a priority in their obligations. So those factors help to contribute to continue sending money. It doesn't mean that there were people who actually stopped sending money. Overall, we look at different countries where at least 10% of households stopped receiving remittances. And even in the case of Moldova, that occurred. However, on the aggregate, the flows continue to increase. And even as we speak, in 2021, there is a significant growth, over 10% in the flow of remittances to several countries, including Moldova. So what is the significance of this trend with regards to countries like Moldova? Well, there are 2 important elements here. One is that in practical terms, all those countries whose remittance dependence, income dependence on remittances is more than 5%, are those countries that are basically what we call fragile states. They have a very low levels of economic complexity, very low levels of per capita income, very low levels of democratic and rule of law performance, low levels also associated to climate change management. So these are predominantly fragile economies. So within the context of the global pandemic, where you see an even further deterioration of all of these indicators of well-being, remittances being the most stable one, showing a counter-cyclical pattern, the main significance is that it has allowed these economies to have less severe shocks. Moving forward, however, in 2021, while the vaccine is having a very slow effect in the administration over the population, basically most developing countries will actually have the full vaccination of their population until next year. The continuity of these flows and even the increase will help mitigate some of the risk of the slow economic recovery. But that comes basically to the next question, what's next? How do we go about leveraging remittances within this context? It's not the issue of remittances that we've been talking about this for decades in many fora. In fact, many of my colleagues here, we worked in Moldova for the past 15 years. on efforts to strengthen the intersection between migration and development in Moldova. And one critical issue in this context is that remittances definitely need to be leveraged at this point in time to modernize the local economies in this country. And this is a strategy that can be done at least following 4 different approaches. The first one is deepening financial access. This is an issue that we've been talking all along. We've done partnerships with different banks in Moldova in order to increase financial inclusion in this country. In practical terms, there are 850,000 households in Moldova that receive remittances in a country of 1.4 million households. Practically 50% of Moldova is remittance dependent. Now, 70% of those households actually have a savings capacity equivalent to $1,200. That's $600 million in stock of savings. Only 20% of that group actually have their savings in a financial institution, in a banking regulated institution or in a savings and credit association. So the gap, it's significantly wide. We're talking about at least 450,000 households that still need to have access to the financial system. But formalizing those savings, we're talking about $300 to $400 million will increase access into credit for the local economies. And this is a critical element, especially where at least 30% of Moldova's urban sector is informal. Not to mention that 70% of people working in agriculture actually work rather informally. So formalizing savings and mobilizing them into credit to local economy will have an effect, a significant effect in productivity in that country. And this particularly focused on the digital economy. Why digital? 2 main reasons. One is that the integration of cash flows into a country's economy actually increases wealth by 10%. Number 2, by putting that money into the financial sector, you're actually making it available for credit, particularly if you direct that money into the high migration areas. And this is really important because structurally, Moldova's international migration patterns are actually slowing down. And with demographic with slow or dropping demographic growth in Moldova and also declining migration over time, and an economy that is not growing significantly, you're going to face severe economic problems in this country. So at this point in time, it's really urgent to focus on the formalization of savings, mobilizing them into the productive sector, particularly in the informal economy, by making this informal sector more competitive.
Mr. Orozco, I'm very sorry to interrupt you. Can you please jump to the conclusions? So
I'm actually concluding. Thank you. The other element to focus on is also to strengthen the savings and credit associations. Some of them do not have the capacity to work on this segment, but others can be important payers of remittances. IFAD has worked in this field in strengthening some of these associations for that purpose. And finally, working with some of the associations that the colleague from the diaspora office was talking about, by getting them to participate in projects that are more philanthropic in nature, but can actually contribute to deal with climate change, with, for example, environmental conservation in some rural areas of Moldova. So the opportunities exist, are practical, and they can be integrated to precision, proportionality, and scale. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Orozco, for such a spot-on and detailed analysis of the developments in the sector post-COVID. With that, we move in our discussion further to the topic of how we convert remittances into savings and savings into investments. And I would like to invite to reflect on this Ms. Olesia Frunze, Head of Startup Financing Department at the Organization for Small and Medium Enterprises Sector Development. Doamna Frunze, aveți cuvântul.
Bună ziua tuturor!
Good day to everybody. I would like to welcome you from behalf of the Organization for Development of Small and Medium Enterprises, UDIM. Once again, I would like to point out the importance of the program for attracting remittances in the economy, PARE 1+1, which is actually one of the first, but also one of the biggest program from the portfolio of UDIM that started to provide to businessmen non-reimbursable financing for startups. The governmental program, PARE 1+1, was launched in 2010 with the support of EU, and it aims to mobilize or to channel the remittances towards investments in economy or investments in creating and developing business by the migrants or their families. As of today, we have over 367 million lei that has been provided as grants. As well, over here we have an economic effect of investments into economy of over 1 billion lei. Thus, over the years, we have had thousands of persons, migrants, and their families who have benefited from this program. And today, the implementation of PARE program means the returning of migrants at home, development of new business, including innovational business in rural localities from the Republic of Moldova. It also means new jobs created for young people and women, also means increasing investments into national economy. Since 2010 until now, the program proved to be a successful tool, and thus it has been prolonged during different periods of time for the next 3 years. As well, during this current year, in the agenda of UDIM, we are envisaging to extend the program for the next 3 years. But of course, we also would like to improve the respective program, adjusting it to the current needs of the beneficiaries. In this respect, we are going to involve experts, but also colleagues from the Ministry of Economy, as well as colleagues from IOM, who have been at the basis of creating the first grants for migrants. As well, we are reviewing the possibility of modifying the scheme of financing, because during the implementation of the respective grant, this amount has been increased. As well, it has been changed in the benefit of their migrants. But at the same time, we're examining another opportunity, and this would be, why not, a modification of providing financing 2+1, or maybe to create a new stage. For instance, for the graduates of this program who would like to extend their business further on. In this respect, we are open to proposals from all the partners. At the same time, I would like to mention that currently UDIM is implementing over 12 programs of supporting business, which somehow are targeting as well the returned migrants and their families. And we are very glad to see that a migrant worker who has returned has started with establishing a startup through PARE program, started from scratch, and afterwards benefiting from all the support tools, is developing the business and is coming up with a competitive product on the local market, but also on the international market. As well, we are open and we are implementing different partnerships with ILO, UN Women, and they are filling in the programs for startups, such as PARE 1+1, Women in Business, programs for young people, with different additional support, such as training, as well as covering the co-financing, which is necessary for the contribution in the program. Thus, with the help of the partners, we can help, well, we can also reach the vulnerable segments, the young people, the migrants from rural localities, so as to help them to be competitive with the other beneficiaries and for them to benefit from these programs of support in business. Hence, as a conclusion, Hence, as a conclusion, I would like to mention that indeed, PARE program remains to be a very important program for ODIM and also for the country, which is going to be extended and improved. And of course, we will adjust and we will improve other support programs for business, but also we will create new opportunities. And over here, as I already have mentioned, we're open for collaboration and proposals. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this detailed description of the evolution of the support for business for migrants, which is creating jobs here in the Republic of Moldova. And
discussing the climate lens of migration and how the climate migration nexus is already manifesting and will manifest itself in Moldova. And with that in mind, I would like to invite for her speech Ms. Victoria Jacot, Senior Consultant for Pollution Prevention and Environmental Assessment Policies Department at the Ministry of Agriculture, Regional Development and Environment in the Government of Moldova. Doamna Jacot, aveți cuvântul.
Da, bună ziua tuturor! Sunt onorată să particip la evenimentul.
Good day to everybody. I'm honored to participate at the event of today that is initiating the discussions about the consolidation of the relations with the development partners in the migration area, including reintegration and sustainable development and climate changes activities in the Republic of Moldova. It goes without doubt that the phenomenon of climate changes may actually endanger the humanity development because it can impact such as the rising level of the ocean, vulnerability of ecosystems to the climate, to the natural disasters such as floods, disasters, or droughts. And all of this is imposing the nations to undertake some actions focused on reducing the intensity of these processes, but also mitigating and adjusting them to the negative consequences of the respective phenomena. Presently, in the Republic of Moldova, we are implementing 2 iterations of the process of adjusting to the climate changes. I'm referring to the NAP2 project implemented by UNDP. Thus, within the project, they have been identified and established several sectors, vulnerable sectors, in which we are going to undertake different activities for mitigating and adjusting to the climate changes. These sectors will be water resources, energy, transportation, health, and forestry. As well, the adjustment of the agricultural sector to the climate changes is being implemented now with the support of FAO within the EGESAP project. Until now, some activities for identifying the interconnection between the climate changes and migration in the Republic of Moldova are not yet implemented. That is why until currently, any activities for identifying the interconnection between the climate changes and migration in the Republic of Moldova were not implemented. That is why the different activities on the subject were not prioritized. It goes without saying that all the sectors vulnerable to the climate changes could actually affect and increase the process of migration within the country. Thus, the availability of water resources, development of agriculture in different regions, health services, and transportation infrastructure. All of them can potentially influence the phenomenon of migration. At the same time, we can see a reverse link between these phenomena. For instance, migration from rural localities towards urban localities can be actually adjust these services to the climate changes. So the process of adaptation is going to be more complicated. These would be some ideas whenever we're thinking about the link between the climate changes and migration. And also, we don't have concrete data on this. So the connection between migration and climate changes is for the first time tackled in the Republic of Moldova, and especially by our division. So whenever we are talking about migration from within the country, outside the country, outside that this is a challenge in order to determine the link between migration and climate changes. The Ministry of our ministry with an up-to-do project is developing the program of adjusting to climate change.
Our ministry is involved in this, and we believe it's very important to reflect here the migration issue, and that is via the sectors that have to be reflected here: transportation, road, agriculture. And inclusion of these aspects related to migration caused by climate changes into the national policies of adaptation is really important, and we are open for cooperation with the IOM and UNDP Moldova in order to set the indicators and information necessary to make correct conclusions and develop recommendations on this topic and connect them with the national climate change adaptation process and the impact on migration. We believe that this aspect will bring added value to the adaptation process to climate changes and to setting certain objectives, mid-term and long-term objectives in this area. Thank you very much for your attention and for the invitation to the event. If you have any questions, I am available to answer. Thank you very much for this intervention.
Issue that has been a hot topic of the day basically throughout the year of 2020, namely what fluctuations are we expecting in the remittance volumes and why it was that they in fact increased during COVID-19, how this can be explained. For that, I would like to invite for the speech by far the most knowledgeable person in the Republic of Moldova on this topic, Ms. Angela Moraru, Head of Balance of Payments Compilation Department at the National Bank of Moldova. Doamnă Moraru, aveți cuvântul. Doamnă Moraru, nu vă auzim la moment.
We don't hear you. She didn't switch on the mic. Can you hear me now? Yes. So you can see my presentation? Yes. So hello, dear colleagues, honored audience. Thank you very much to the organizers for the invitation to participate in this event. It's true that the financial interests generated by economic migration are very important for the national economy. But today, there are no statistical indicators that would measure them directly at the national level. At the international level, the remittances and the transfers of money of individuals are used for capturing this migration phenomenon and remuneration of residents by non-residents. According to the recommendations of the IMF, the indicator that is reflecting cumulatively the migration of the population and the remuneration of the residents by non-residents and personal remittances. And because the personal remittances are of increased importance and have a major impact on the Republic of Moldova, the National Bank did develop a model to estimate them, which includes also the informal entries. To estimate the resources transferred via the formal and non-formal channels, we analyzed a number of sources of data, like, for example, remittances of cash, evolution of deposits of individuals, evolution of cash in foreign currency, the turnover of the foreign exchange offices, and the evolutions on the real estate market, and the savings and consumption of households, as well as other sources of data, like, for example, the specialized research statistics of partners. In 2020, the remittances, personal remittances, did register the value of $1.8 million. This indicator got stabilized in the last 3 years at the level of 15% of GDP. The personal remittances had a fluctuation, a very significant one. The National Bank is undertaking considerable efforts to capture the entries of remittances via informal channels. Thus, at the beginning of the pandemic, along with the big number of people returning to the country, the informal entries did have a share of 38%. Immediately in the next quarter, as a result of introducing the circulation traveling restrictions, the share decreased to 9%. If in the Q1 2020, the entries via the informal channels did grow by about 20% compared to Q1 of the previous year, in the next quarter, this decreased by about 80%. The trend of decreasing trend did continue, being of about 60% in Q3 and 40% in the next quarter of the year. Along with the decrease in the entries, informal entries, the formal ones did grow. Another characteristic of the evolution of personal remittances is the geographical changes in their origin. In 2020, compared to 2018, the share of entries from the European Union did grow by 11% compared to the previous year, and the share of those from the CIS countries decreased by 14 percentage points. The trend of growing transfers from the European Union got emphasized in the pandemic period, both as value as well as goods. The red line that represents the European Union is significantly above zero and is growing in both cases. We shall mention also that the average value of a transfer of money is relatively small. In 2020, about 30% of the value that entered was represented of amounts below $500. And in conclusion, I would like to reiterate, based on what was mentioned above, that although we do not have statistical indicators specialized to measure the economic migration financially, the NBM is compiling and publishing the national indicators on personal remittances, and one of the main sources estimated is about the transfers of money. During the last 3 years, the value of personal remittances stabilized at the level of about 15% of GDP, including during the pandemic period. The pandemic did condition the reorientation of the entries of personal remittances from informal to formal channels. The trend of growing entries from the EU, already registered in the recent years, has been emphasized in the pandemic period, both as value and as well as a numeric value. The amount of the individual transfer is rather small, thus 3/4 of the total volume of remittances have registered values below 2,000 USD. Thank you very much for your attention, and if there are questions, I'm ready to answer. Thank you very much, Mrs. Moraro, for this analysis.
This session up with the intervention from Mr. Andrei Daria, the program specialist at UNDP Moldova. Mr. Daria, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Vladislav. Colleagues, happy to be here and discuss an issue of such an importance, migration and challenges it brings, but also opportunities. Much has already been mentioned today about the impact of migration on remittances to the country's development. And it is a known fact that the consequences of migration are mostly felt at local level by the local communities, migrants and their families, as well as local governments who are on front line when it comes to dealing with the negative effects, but also leveraging the positive ones for the development of their communities. Actually, many of the challenges have been mentioned today, like loss of human capital, particularly from rural areas, remittances mostly being used for private consumption, coupled with the limited engagement of diaspora migrants for the country's development, and lack of awareness of local public authorities on the latter's potential.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we're unable to see you.
Sorry, I think there is a problem with my camera.
And now we can see you. Sorry, go ahead. Yes.
Yes, thank you. So, going from challenges, next allow me to continue the discussion and talk about the UNDP experience of leveraging the potential of diaspora with the support of Switzerland. This experience focuses on reshifting remittances towards local development, targeting an integrated approach of leveraging diaspora's contribution on one hand to local public services development and on the other to local economic development. So since 2015, UNDP, with the support of Switzerland, designed and successfully piloted in 38 communities from Moldova an effective tailor-made, as we call it, diaspora migration and development model of migrants' engagement into local development, pursuing the improvement of basic local public services, creating jobs and income-generating activity. This approach was based on 5 pillars focused on strengthening the institutional framework, using evidence and mainstreaming migration in local socioeconomic development strategies, but also building strong partnerships between LPAs, local public authorities, and diaspora organized in hometown associations, and using innovative instruments such as crowdfunding, for example. So as a result, the hometown associations succeeded to implement, as of today, about 190 joint local service projects, co-designed, co-funded, and co-implemented by and with migrants and local authorities. Over 300,000 people at local level now benefit of better services in their villages and cities, be it road infrastructure, street lighting, waste management, or others. To be mentioned that the provided seed funding by the development partners, it is the amount of about 1.3 million, co-generated local investments in the amount of 1.9 million, and I mean government, local contributions, but also diaspora share, achieving a high financial multiplication effort. Actually, the local investments included about 90% funds collected from the migrants community. Currently, the good practice of engaging migrants in local development continues to gain ground and be expanded to new communities. More than 200 other communities replicated our diaspora migration and development model. And when I say our, I mean the model owned nationally. As mentioned by the representatives of the Bureau for Diaspora Relations in the first panel, a new national program, DAR 1+3, mirroring the model of migrants' engagement in local development, was instituted and offers sustainable instruments for local governments and diaspora to join efforts in advancing the development agenda at local level. This program is effective since 2020 and has successfully supported more than 60 projects of local public authorities and diaspora, including 19 with the support and co-financing offered by Switzerland through the Migration and Local Development Project implemented by UNDP. Dear partners, I would like to mention that the diaspora engagement has already yielded promising results and is on track to deliver more. For example, with our support, by the end of 2022, 12 touristic routes and recreational spaces will be created, 4 post-harvest infrastructure units, business support facilities, centers for recycling waste, agri-food markets, livestock businesses, and many other businesses are currently being developed. Actually, not businesses, but local economic development projects are currently being developed in the 25 communities across various regions of the country. In total, about 48 existing businesses and another 50 startups are assisted to modernize, merge, and extend their activities. Among these, to be mentioned that 36 businesses are created by returned migrants and their relatives. Colleagues, as you can see, it has been possible to leverage the effects of migration and engage diaspora in producing sustainable results. And I would like to conclude with the call to continue the great work done so far and build strong partnerships and sustainable communities together. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this important intervention. And as I see no questions in the Q&A box from the members of the public, nor do I see any hands raised for potential questions on behalf of other panelists, I would like to thank all the keynote speakers and panelists and the UNDP and IOM for the opportunity to moderate this wonderful panel, and hand it back over to Oksana.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kaim, and thank you to all the speakers for the amazing interventions. It is my pleasure now to invite you to the third panel of the discussion, which will be on labor mobility and skills. This session is expected to also last about 40 minutes and will be moderated by Mr. Vasily Yuzanin, who is Senior Labor and Human Mobility Facilitation Specialist at IOM. We are in a bit of delay, so we would very much encourage you to stick to the time, 5 minutes delegated per each speaker. Mr. Vasily, the floor is all yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Oksana. And in fact, I think this session will be slightly different, as we agreed inside the panel from the previous one. And it will be different in two aspects. One aspect is that I will have an honor and the privilege to be not only the moderator for the session, but also the keynote speaker. And the second difference would be, as we agreed within the panel, we will have it in a questions and answers form, in the form of the discussion. And we hope that we will be able to do at least 2 rounds of questions and answers, so that there will not be the presentations. And we have really a fantastic panel. Let me start, please, with the presentation of the panel. So we have the following members. Miss Monica Alfara Murcia, Legal and Policy Officer, European Commission, Directorate General Migration and Home Affairs of the European Commission. We have Ms. Anna Gerganova, Head of the Employment Policy and Migration Management Department, Ministry of Health, Labor and Social Protection. We have Ms. Marcelina Baletza, Interim Head of the Lifelong Learning Service, Ministry of Education, Culture and Research. We have His Excellency Mr. Stephen Fisher, British Ambassador to the Republic of Moldova. And we have Ms. Irena Charovic, the Head of Solutions Mapping, UNDP Serbia. And well, having this excellent panel and looking forward into the discussion, I would like to perhaps not to say that it will be a keynote speech, but rather setting the frameworks for our discussion, maybe 4 minutes talk about the overall frames that relate to labor mobility and skills and the key aspects that are there, and what we need to consider in order to have labor and skills managed in an effective way, connecting them to mobility. And I would like perhaps to raise 4 important aspects. One of the main important issues is the cooperation and interaction, partnerships on skills and mobility between origin and destination countries. So this cooperation should be based on multi-stakeholder approach involving all actors, but not only on the government side, but also from the side of involving other key important stakeholders, such as private sector, as employers, but also as training provider, as investor, involving the civil society, the social partners, the academia, and other stakeholders. And cooperation and partnership need to concern not only labor mobility management aspects. IOM, for instance, works on these migration management and governance programs for the decades, but also needs to involve skills development, recognition, matching, and retention. So we need to bring closely to each other the aspects of migration and training and labor market connected skills development. Second aspect I would like to underline, and that's important for our discussion today, is many factors that influence nowadays the labor mobility, and well, the big elephant in the room is of course COVID. The situation created by COVID created unemployment, labor market misbalances, restrictions on mobility, but nevertheless it demonstrated the high interdependence of states on labor migration issues, on importance of mobility to fill in labor market gaps and ensure the development. And basically, skills-based mobility just reconfirmed its high pertinence, even in the times of such crisis as COVID. Another thing which COVID taught us to understand is how important skills are at all levels. In a nutshell, cleaners, nurses, caregivers are as important as doctors. So we just realized how vulnerable at the same time migrant workers could be, and we need to ensure their rights and access to services. And in fact, the human rights policies need to be founded on human rights and labor standards basis. And with respect to COVID, one other thing which is important is the links. I mean, the exacerbation, or basically the COVID demonstrated us the current trends which are important and within the framework of which we need to put our labor mobility and skills policies. This is digitization, this is automation, this is increased competition for skills and talents, this is globalization of labor markets, and the acute needs for urgent actions to address climate change through inter alia initiatives on skills development. The third fact I would like to underline is the importance of data. We discussed it a lot, I will not stop with it. But at the same time, the importance of the global frameworks such as GCM and SDGs, and the tools that these two frameworks are providing to us. For instance, on skills, the very important one is Objective 18. So we need to realize or embrace the importance of cooperation and the ongoing cooperation in the area of education, skills development, and look at the programs that relate to joint degrees, internships, apprenticeships, and other similar initiatives, and establish effective skills categorization and recognition systems and cooperate on it. And also use multilateral and bilateral cooperation, such and agreements and frameworks for this, such as bilateral labor migration agreements, trade, or economic development. So I'm concluding this framework, setting framework, but just by underlining the importance of the issues which were defined by the UNDP-IOM framework for cooperation, which had a holistic approach to skills and mobility issue, and touches the aspects from the perspective of the entire migration continuum, not only for the skills preparedness aspect related to the skills recognition and retention, but also looking at the aspects from the return and reintegration perspective. And I think we need to really understand and to drive the discussion in two main aspects: on existing existing policies and cooperation frameworks and mechanisms that are available to us, and how this in the end contributes to the development. And basically setting up these two aspects, I would like perhaps ask my first question addressed to Ms. Monica Alfaro Murcia. From the European Commission, European Union perspective, could you please tell us the main aspects of the EU current vision on labor mobility and skills, and maybe touching particularly the aspects related to the development of the EU Pact on Migration and its stance on skills-based mobility and how it tackles cooperation and partnerships with the countries of origin. Please, Ms. Murcia, the floor is yours for the response.
Thank you very much, Vasily. I would like to first thank you, IOM, for the invitation to this very interesting event. And I'm very happy to share with you the current EU vision policy on labor migration in the context of the Pact on Migration and Asylum that was adopted last year. In 2019, member states issued more than 3 million first resident permits to third country nationals, of which over 1 million were for employment purposes. This is fully recognized in the Pact, which has a strong focus on labor migration. Labor migrants can play an important role in the context of skill shortages, and legal migration can provide us with the right talent and skills. However, as mentioned as well by Vasily, nowadays only 1 in 4 highly educated migrants residing in the OECD chooses the EU destination, while almost 2 out of 3 rather choose to settle in North America or Oceania. In this respect, just a few weeks ago, we reached a political agreement on the EU Blue Card Directive. The new scheme will introduce more efficient rules in attracting highly skilled workers to the EU, including more flexible admission conditions, improved rights, and the possibility to move and work more easily between the member states. But of course, legal migration, as we are discussing, is not only about highly skilled workers. We also need the labor migrants in low and medium skilled sectors. Indeed, the COVID-19 pandemic put into focus the vital contribution made by migrants. For example, 25% of the workers in the personal care and food preparation sectors are born outside the EU. So in this context, as announced in the Pact as well, by the end of this year, the Commission will present a skill and talent package, in which firstly we propose the revision of the Directive on Long-Term Residence to improve the rights and also the intra-EU mobility of those migrants that are already well integrated in our societies. We will also propose the review of the Single Permit Directive to further facilitate the application procedures, to look into the issue of low and medium skilled workers and admission conditions. And finally, we would like to explore the options to develop a EU talent pool, which is an EU-wide platform for international recruitment that will help to match the skills of migrant workers with the needs of the EU employers. And just to conclude, with regard to the external dimension of migration cooperation with third countries, the Pact announced the launch of the talent partnerships with third countries, which will provide a EU policy and funding framework to engage with key third countries, also for mobility projects to better match labor skills and skills needs in the countries of origin and destinations. I leave it here, but we can continue, of course, and available for more questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is really interesting, and well, it really also demonstrates on the side of destination countries the needs, the look towards the needs to better match the available skills with the job opportunities and different aspects that are related to it. What you mentioned, connection to migration processes, permits, integration aspects, and many other things. I hope we will come back to this in the course of the discussion, but in the meantime, I would like to move perhaps to Moldova, to the origin country, and perhaps ask a question to Ms. Anna Gerganova on the latest changes in the migration management policy of the Republic of Moldova, perhaps giving also an insight to us on institutional systems and support from the side of Moldova towards ethical recruitment and assuring safety and well-being of Moldovan migrants. Ms. Gerganova, the floor is yours for the response.
Bună ziua, stimați parteneri, stimați colegi participanți la acest eveniment.
Hello, dear partners and participants to this event. I'm really glad to be present here and discuss this roadmap. Our ministry is ready to participate in the implementation of this roadmap, by which we are planning to come with additional solutions or new one to harness this potential of migration and also the challenges that are associated to the migration of labor force in the Republic of Moldova. In the Republic of Moldova, in the recent year, we did have more developments related to the legal framework and institutional one with regard to the labor force migration management. I would like to say in brief that in the Republic of Moldova, we do have the law. A law was adopted 2 years ago, a new law on the labor employment, which contains a separate chapter regulating the way in which the migration of labor force is taking place, who is participating in this process from the authorities, what is the role of the private agencies, and what are the ways in which citizens of the Republic of Moldova can go abroad and so on. And in the most interesting aspects that I would like to mention in this sense is that we revised, in fact, the regulations referring to the activity of the private agencies, recruitment agencies in the Republic of Moldova, and referring here, first of all, to the licensing procedure. And so there has been introduced a single license for one country. So until now, we did have as many licenses as many countries exist. And at the same time, a new important provision was introduced in our opinion, which is the preliminary verification of the partner from the foreign partner with which the private agency is working or cooperating. And also we've developed and approved the control mechanism of the private agencies from the Republic of Moldova. And this is supposed to be to start being used starting from next year. And what I wanted to mention also that there has been introduced also the accountability of the private agencies in relation to the citizens they are placing on the labor market abroad, but we also regulated the role of the embassies of the Republic of Moldova abroad in this process. We have developed also a separate procedure related to the recruitment, or how this recruitment is taking place by the private agencies. So, and the responsibility, for example, of the private agency with regard to the citizens, one being the guarantee to inform the citizens very well with regard to their rights and obligations with regard to their work abroad. And another additional information that I wanted to bring to your attention refers to the fact, I've seen that it is mentioned also among the questions that you have addressed before the event with regard to the bilateral agreements. So the Republic of Moldova is implementing this tool by which we regulate the circular migration. At the moment, we do have signed and functional agreements with 2 countries, with Israel and with Bulgaria. We cannot say that we have such a possibility to influence much the decisions of the countries of destination, to influence as regards the skills development of the Moldovan migrants in the countries of destination. Regretfully, we are still a country of origin for jobs, unskilled jobs in the countries of destination, and this is the biggest problem and the negative impact of migration in the Republic of Moldova, because we are facing with an exodus of labor force, a skilled one, a very high exodus of labor force, skilled labor force, which very often in the countries of destination are working in on jobs that require much lower skills than they have. In addition, another aspect I wanted to mention is that this phenomenon of migration did influence very much the labor market, and we can even say that it distorted the offer and demand internally on the labor market. So we have many people who have a temporary job abroad, and when getting back to the Republic of Moldova, they don't want to accept the available jobs on the labor market. And thus, we do have labor force that is attributed to the non-active one on the one hand, and on the other hand, we have vacancies under the control of the employment agency, which we don't deal with. So it's a very big problem on our labor market, and we hope that during the implementation of this roadmap, we will think about this issue too.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gerganova.
Thank you very much.
Really interesting insights, and I really interested to learn about the internal policy approaches, as well as the initiatives in the area of interstate bilateral cooperation. But also you put a very nice bridge towards the issue of available jobs and perhaps matching of skills that returning migrants have in these jobs, and how they evaluate these skills with respect to available jobs. And I think at this point it would be great to hear some of the insights from Ms. Marcelina Baletsa, who is representing the Ministry of Education and Culture. And this is really a very valuable, very important stakeholder in the area of skills and labor mobility. And I would like to ask her on the tools and approaches that Ministry of Education use to ensure the training and education relevance to the labor market needs, also including the foreign labor markets, and and also perhaps touch the issue of growing importance of non-technical soft skills that are becoming more and more important, and their usage by migrant workers when they go abroad and when they come back, how these skills are utilized. So the question towards you, Ms. Baletsa.
Stimați parteneri externi, donatori, participanți la evenimentul de astăzi, de lansarea foii de parcurs multianuale.
Participants at this event for launching the roadmap of IOM and UNDP. Good day to all of you. The Ministry of Education and Research pays specific attention to the area of migration and develops educational policies so as to have the possibility to reintegrate our migrants whenever they come back, and also to provide to them different educational opportunities. Initial and continuous education programs represent a priority for the ministry, and the collaboration with external partners, with the representatives of all the institutions that are related to this segment, has contributed to developing the necessary tools for adjusting the professional and vocational development of the persons to the needs of the labor market, to the needs of the adults who would like to learn during all their life. A tool for ensuring the relevance of training and education to the needs of the labor market would be to ensure the cycle of the quality in the system that starts with the analysis of the labor market and finishes with providing educational services. For fulfilling this cycle of equality, the ministry, together with the representatives of other line ministries, with the sector committees, with experts in the area, have developed the occupational standards, qualification standards, and afterwards we have developed the programs of initial and continuous training in order to ensure with the specialists that are demanded on the labor market. At the same time, by developing the programs of continuous training meant to adults in order to develop the professional skills, we also try our best to cope with existing changes on the labor market so as to train the adults to cope with these changes. Another tool for ensuring the relevance of formation of training and education to the needs of the labor market would be the development of dual vocational training. Currently, out of those 80 economic units involved in the development of the dual vocational training system, many of them are with foreign capital, and the on-job training provides the possibility to the young people to cope with the demands of the labor market from the country and from abroad, and to be on the same track with the best practices, successful practices in the area of their specialization in our country, but also abroad. The mobility, the human mobility, the taking over of good practices, taking over the tools provided by the ministry in partnership with external partners and the representatives of all the institutions interested in developing this area has led to the situation when we have developed the vocational training segment so as to be in line with the demands and requirements of diaspora and migrants. On the side of the Ministry of Education, Culture and Research, we have all the information regarding their technical vocational institutions, as well as providers of continuous training programs, as well as the programs that are being provided by these providers for different specialties, professions, qualifications, so as to meet the requirements of the citizens and migrants. At the same time, I'm going to refer as well to recognition of the professional ability skills that have been acquired in informal and non-formal contexts. In order to recognize the respective skills, the Ministry of Education, Culture and Research, with support of UNDP and IOM, has created centers for validation of professional skills. As of today, in the Republic of Moldova, we have 8 centers for validation of professional skills in different qualifications, specialties in the technical vocational area. We envisage to extend this normative framework so as to cover higher education segment as well for the area of sport and arts. This information also is being posted on the website of the Ministry of Education, Culture and Research. We work together with the Employment Agency, with the Centers of Excellencies, in which the respective validation centers have been established in order to meet all the requirements and requests coming from our citizens, from migrants who would like to return on the labor market of the Republic of Moldova. At the same time, upon the request of the migrants, we have united our efforts in order to open a center for validation of vocational competencies in the Center of Excellency of Medicine and Pharmacy for carers for old people, because this kind of skills is in high demand abroad. At the same time, we would like to communicate that another solution for recognition of the professional and vocational skills would be related to the chapters in the Agreement of Association, because we have agreement of association that have been concluded with Ukraine, Romania, Bulgaria, and other countries, based on which the diplomas and certificates are being recognized bilaterally. If there are any questions in relation to this segment, I'm available to provide you answers in relation to the area of education.
Thank you, Ms. Ballet. It's a very rich answer, and I would like to specifically thank you for mentioning all the initiatives that are taken in the area of labor market oriented skills development. You also mentioned one important aspect which I really applaud is the involvement of the diaspora, which we know plays a crucial role in skills development, may share skills, but at the same time plays an important role in the integration of the migrants in countries of destination. And this is what the roadmap speaks about. Now I would like to move from the country of origin to the country of destination, and perhaps hear some views from another country, from the country of destination, from British Ambassador, His Excellency Stephen Fisher, on if you could please tell us about the UK policy regarding skills and skills-based mobility, and how it envisages the cooperation of the UK with countries of origin such as Moldova, for instance. Excellency, the floor for response is yours.
Thank you very much, Vasily. I hope you can hear me. Indeed. I'm not sure if you can see me, but I'll bat on. Oh, yes, there I am. Right. Excellent. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to take part. I'll try to be very brief. I mean, we are a country that has experienced migration from both sides. There was huge migration out of the United Kingdom through the 70s and 80s, in particular the 70s. And there was also large migration into the United Kingdom, including from Moldova more recently. Our policy has not been to look at our diaspora abroad as a source of skills or capital or any particular assistance. Of course, we welcome it when it comes, but when we've faced challenges in our own labor market and a lack of skills in particular, and I'm thinking here of the health service, for example, or maybe in the IT sector where growth has outstripped the local, our own education system's ability to provide the workforce that we need to sustain growth. We have opened up to anybody that wants to migrate to our country that has the skills. And this is one of the points I wanted to make, because although this is primarily about migration and diaspora, I think a country like Moldova also needs to be aware of the possibility of opening up to inward migration from other countries, possibly where there is more interest in migrating. So, I mean, that's just one thing to put on the table. We operate a skills-based system, which means that we evaluate people that want to migrate to our country on the basis of the contribution they can make to the economy, based on their skills, their education, and their opportunities for work in our country. And we basically let anybody in. We treat every country the same in that regard. So that's the first thing to say about our own policy at home. At this point, before moving on to what we could do in Moldova and what we will aim to do in this region, I'm just going to make sure I don't run out of battery. So bear with me for 1 second, please. Thank you very much for your patience there. So I think that the thing is with regard to British development assistance to Moldova and other countries in this region, we primarily try to react to what the government of the host country is trying to do. And I think at this point, I would say that it's very important that Moldova works out what it wants to do with its diaspora and with its very rich diaspora, rich in sense of numbers, but also in sense of skills and diversity that is abroad. And we've heard some great presentations today from people working in the Moldovan system, and I have absolute respect for everything I've heard from colleagues on this panel and previous ones. So there's clearly a lot happening, and I think Moldova is working out the answer to that question. What do we want from the diaspora? Diasporas can give you lots of things. They can help with your economic development. They can help in times of humanitarian disaster, they can help charitably, they can help with your public services, which is one way that we've used inward immigration, and they can help with their capital and so forth. Moldova needs to work out which of those types of assistance it's looking for from its diaspora. And I think in Moldova's case, there is another, perhaps more fundamental question, which is that yes, let me do that. I think there's a fundamental question, which is the question of depopulation. I mean, the United Kingdom, fortunately, did not face the problem of a quarter of its population leaving in a short number of years, which Moldova has faced. So I could imagine that in government circles here, one of the reasons for wanting to reach out to the diaspora and maintain those links, and a quite valid reason, is to actually prevent really structural damage to the country's long-term sustainability by losing too many of its people. So I think there are lots of reasons why you want to do this. I would come back to the economy, and my last remarks will be about the economy, because that's where UK aid really focuses, or at least has done in Moldova in recent years. I'd say we've tried to help Moldova to improve its governance through something we have called the Good Governance Fund, which is a multi-year aid program which has worked on a number of projects here. And that includes the competitiveness of certain sectors in the economy. So my final point would be that I think diaspora policy for a country like Moldova needs to begin with economic policy. And economic policy needs to ideally target certain sectors where the country may have the potential for really strong growth in the years to come. And economic experts need to work out what those sectors are. And I think the Moldovan government has done that work, and we've certainly taken part in a program which is trying to promote tourism, IT, textiles, robotics in education, and other sectors. Those are the main ones that we've tried to work in. And I think once you've identified which are the key growth sectors in your economy, we'd have to include agriculture as well in that. I think once you've identified that, you can refine your understanding of what the skills deficits are that you have in your economy, and then you can go out to the world to look for those skills deficits if you don't currently have the capacity in your education system to fill them. And with Moldova's case, of course, the diaspora then comes into play. You can see whether the skills that you've analyzed that the diaspora has match the skills that you need in your economy, and ideally you then design some policies to attract those people back to play constructive part in your economy. So we've done that, but we didn't focus on our diaspora. So I think all countries are doing that all the time. But in Moldova's case, I suppose it has the added advantage. It's not simply going out to the international community saying, we have opportunities to work in these sectors, but it actually has a population abroad which has the linguistic and cultural and sort of heritage links with the home country. So our aid and support, and I'll wrap up with this, will continue to be in the economic sphere, but it's up to the Moldovan government to really, and then the next one to come in after the next election, to decide where it's going to place the emphasis on its industrial policy and economic policy. What are the sectors it's going to really try to grow? And then, taking it from there, what are the skills that it needs to make a success of that? And the UK, along with other development partners, will respond to that, and we will continue to try to work to help Moldova make itself more prosperous. I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador. Really great. And actually, well, I thank you, first of all, for covering in a very comprehensive way the aspect of skills-based mobility to the UK. And at the same time, I mean, the question which I really wanted to come up as a follow-up on where you see the prospects for development cooperation between the UK and Moldova. And I actually, following up on what has been discussed, I would like to turn my next question to Ms. Irena Cherovic, the head of solutions mapping, our sister agency UNDP from Serbia, and ask the following question. I mean, how we ensure skills-based and labor market-oriented labor mobility contributes effectively to national development strategy, and what tools do we have, the UN in general, to ensure needed policy coherence and implementation? So the floor is yours for the response.
Thank you so much, Vasily, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. It has been fascinating listening to the prior panels. I really look forward to learning from the Moldovan experience with the roadmap. It, I think, will be particularly very useful throughout the region. Now, I'll start with saying a few words about how this work is framed in our context in Serbia. I think I'm the only one here coming from a regional perspective to see what maybe some relevance could be detected in for the broader region. Say a few words, illustrative only examples about what are the things how we have been engaging with the problem and where we see the way forward. Now, I come from our Accelerator Lab, which is a sort of new innovation unit that has been dealing in Serbia almost entirely with the question of depopulation since its establishment 2 years ago. And depopulation in Serbia is a context that is not perhaps as existentially dramatic as it is, in my understanding, in Moldova, but it is dramatic enough that we have a sort of paradoxical situation where on the one hand, it's an issue that is completely intuitively understood by literally every person in the street. I think maybe of all of the things that we do as development organizations, this is the one question that everybody really understands, where it needs no explaining. People really, really sense that this is a critical development challenge. And at the same time, politically, it is very much a hot potato, and it is very much something that is sort of so complex and so overwhelming that it's paralyzing. That it's sort of the way that it's at least framed or has been framed in Serbia is such that it actually does not allow action. It's really paralyzing. And it does have to do with, I mean, of course, the question of depopulation is in Serbia not only a question of migration. So it's the sort of mix of a number of factors, and one is the high out migration. Another one is the dropping fertility, which is a sort of global or at least European phenomenon for sure. The question of an aging population, the question of significant regional disbalances, and some parts of the country really emptying, whereas other parts are sort of filling up. And of course, also the question of the lack of an immigration policy, really, and that we don't really know that much explicitly about what kinds of immigration we are bringing in. So the narrative then around the question is one of a sort of, it's a disaster narrative. It's really a narrative of national tragedy with this, and this has been something that's been really impeding action. From our side and from the part of the UN, actually, we've been working very closely together with UNFPA on this in Serbia. That's sort of been the strategic partnership around this so far, is that the disaster narrative is, of course, not helpful, and it's not something, I mean, it turns it into a hot potato that nobody really knows what to do with, and it becomes something that, you know, people don't even want to treat as a challenge. We've been told this in the beginning when we started working on this, including from many development partners, that, you know, maybe you shouldn't really be working on this. It's too slippery. It's too, you know, it's easy to slip into a sort of populist ground, and, you know, is it really a development challenge, and so on. So we do think that there's a different kind of framing that's needed. But on the other hand, it is a very genuine development challenge, and the sort of the question of, you know, it's just framing it just as an opportunity, and including framing diaspora engagement and migration as only an opportunity is a little bit dismissive of the legitimate concerns. So we tried to find a framing that allows for both of this. Of course, the question of the complexity of the issue, and we are treating the issue in its entirety as sort of the depopulation challenge, not just on the from the perspective of migration. It's a really messy one, right? It's incredibly complex, as has been said today many times. You can't really get to the root causes of migration any more than you can get to the root causes with, some degree of certainty of, why people have as many kids as they have, or, when they decide to have them and so on. I'm not sure most of us will not be able to answer these questions for ourselves, why this has been the case and why am I here and not there, and how those paths, change over time as well. So one difficulty is the root causes, and we tended not to depress ourselves too much with this kind of analysis. The other part of why it is so hugely complex is that, of course, you can't really target it. It doesn't make any sense to set targets on population, include on fertility, on migration, on life expectancy, on any of these. It's simply all we can say. The best we can do is we want it to be a little bit better. We sort of want the balance of things to work a little bit more in a different direction than it is today. And the third aspect is, of course, that the challenge is anything but static, particularly the migration aspects. Okay, fertility and these things, they move very, very slowly, but they have compounded, they have very dramatic effects, and it's a very, very dynamic and fast moving challenge. So you can't really target it, you can't detect why it's happening, and it keeps moving, which means combined that this is really not something that we have prepared answers for. I think that's a very important message for all of us in development, and that's one that we're trying to build with a very large number of partners in Serbia, including the government. That we start with that, simply with that notion that this is not something that where our usual approaches or best practices will work, because there aren't any, and because the questions are so complex that we need to figure out completely new ways of engaging with such a system. Add to that complexity the really big ambition and the seriousness of the challenge, and this is why at least in Serbia we have really invested the innovation capabilities that we have in this the most. It has been really a task of the accelerator lab, which in most of the world these labs are working on much more tangible problems. In Serbia, I think this is where we've invested. We said, okay, this is where we need to figure out ways to be really transformative and to really step outside the box. So what we have been doing around this is a couple of things. One is, engaging heavily, of course, with our usual suspects and with a lot of the unusual suspects, including individuals with specific experiences and marginal, from sort of extreme experiences, including with the world-renowned experts and demographers, and including with, completely atypical groups of designers and things who belong to communities that might bring about change from unexpected angles. But most centrally, we've been engaging in reframing the challenge. And it's been currently, we've successfully sort of discussed this with the Prime Minister fairly recently, to tell her that essentially when she talks about depopulation, it should not be about numbers. The depopulation is not only about numbers. And that what it makes, because of all of these things that I've said, because it doesn't make sense to be targeting it, and because that's not a useful narrative, it's not something that we can do anything about, short of starting to, and it's things that government has tried are legit, fine, you can try it with all of the fertility measures, you can try with the incentives for return, with the tax incentives, with these kinds of things, but these, they will have, there's no evidence that these things will work, at least not on the scale that we need them to work, and not at the pace that we need them to work. So let's try to see if there's a different way of looking at it. And the way that we propose is, again, it's very it would take me a long time to go into the nitty gritty, but the general idea is to say it's not about the numbers, it's about maximizing human potential. So the investment in human capital, and that links up, I think, very much to the topic of this panel. And the second aspect is the adaptability of public policies to new demographic realities. That we simply cannot drive our health, education, social systems, local development systems as if it was, 4 decades ago, and that's currently the case. So we need to build that adaptive muscle in the public policy space that recognizes a completely different society, basically, that exists today and that is going to keep changing, and that we need to keep adapting.
Thank you, Irena. I think we really need to wrap up, and I think you have really put two important points. Sure. Of labor mobility policies and adaptability of policies to the current realities. This is really great. So I'm sorry to interrupt you at this point, and this was a well put, and I think that was the right point to kind of put a few dots. So I'm just instructed by the chief moderator, my supervisor, to wrap up this discussion. I'm just asking for, in case there is absolutely burning statement that some of the panelists need to make, 1-2 sentences, please do that. Otherwise, I will pass the floor to Oksana.
I will just put some links into the chat box. That's all I will do.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And again, my apologies, Irena.
No, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Vasily, for moderating excellently this panel. It was extremely interesting to listen to that one, but also to the 3 panels. Indeed, very interesting speakers, and each one has something new to bring up to the table, and this is amazing to listen to you. I'm really sorry we have so little time for such an complex discussion that we have planned for today. With that being said, I would like to thank you again for these wonderful panel discussions, and I would like to welcome back the moderators of the panels with a small, tiny change. Mr. David had an emergency, so Miss Kathleen Newland offered to help us. So she will be the one who will be presenting the conclusions of the first panel on evidence, root causes, and diaspora outreach. Miss Kathleen, the floor is yours, but not before reminding that we are very short on time, and if possible, to do it within 5 minutes of the allocated time slot for that intervention. Thank you very much. The floor is yours, Ms. Kathleen. I don't think we hear you. If you could unmute your microphone.
Yes, thank you. Oksana, I was having some trouble locating, or
thank you.
My mute button was hidden. I apologize in advance for missing some points since I've been asked to make this summary sort of at the last minute, but I'm sure you will recall what an interesting and really important set of contributions we had on evidence, root causes, and diaspora outreach. We had participants from the Bureau for Diaspora Relations, the National Bureau of Statistics, and UNDP Regional Hub. Oria Spotaru illuminated the nature of the data that is available on diaspora contributions, particularly from remittances in Moldovan communities. And she told us about the kind of data that is available and the kind of data that is not available, and also about some of the obstacles to getting more complete statistics. For example, we learned that the share of Moldovan households with a migrant has been going up, and what share of their income comes from remittances, perhaps somewhat less than one might have expected. But we also learned that the proportion of the population willing to take part in government surveys has been going down, which is obviously an obstacle to getting more complete data. She also pointed out that there are no international standards for measuring diaspora populations in other countries. So as Moldova is striving to conform more fully to UN standards for demographic data, there was a sort of plea for more international cooperation on getting this kind of data about diaspora populations. Moldova and other countries need agreements with other states on data sharing and also partnerships with researchers to get a more complete picture of the diaspora. Ms. Zubko, the head of the Moldova Diaspora Relations Bureau, gave us a very interesting and comprehensive picture of the activities of the Diaspora Bureau, which are carrying on with well-established programs like the 3-for-1 matching programs, the PARE 1+1, and the newer triple match program, DAR +1, modeled on hometown associations. I think that it was also exciting to hear from her some of the newer structures and programs that the Diaspora Bureau is planning, particularly how to register members of the diaspora so that the outreach to them can be more systematic. That was an extremely interesting array and really demonstrated to me that the Diaspora Bureau is a learning organization that is not sort of resting on its laurels of established programs like the Diaspora Days and the children's programs to return to Moldova, but is also thinking forward about what more is needed. Finally, Mr. Ben Slay, the senior advisor for UNDP's regional hub for Europe and Central Asia in Istanbul, gave us some sort of comparative perspective on what governments in the region are, how they're engaging with diasporas. And I thought it was very interesting to hear him identify the countries that are really leaders in their sub-regions within that Europe and Central Asia. He mentioned Kyrgyzstan in Central Asia, Armenia, Albania in the Western Balkans, and of course, Moldova. So there are a lot of models out there. There's still a great deal of experimentation. And I should just mention also that in my summary at the beginning, I identified the evidence base, as did Ms. Spataro, as being still weak and sort of spotty, especially on diaspora communities abroad. The need to look at push factors beyond the strictly economic, and also for the diaspora outreach efforts to be constantly adapting, evaluating, restructuring if necessary. Final point was the need for patience, both on the part of governments of countries of origin and on the part of development partners who are funding some of these efforts. I hope that captures just a little of what was a very substantive panel. Thanks, Oksana.
Thank you, Ms. Kathleen. And once again, you saved the day. Thank you very much. We appreciate a lot your flexibility for helping us in this situation. And thank you very much for these concluding remarks regarding the conclusions of the panel 1. I would like to further invite Mr. Vladislav Kaim to share the main conclusions from panel 2, which I would like to remind you was about remittances and diaspora investments. Mr. Kaim, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Oksana. For the sake of brevity, unlike Kathleen, I will provide a more concise summary that will already condense all the points that were made by the distinguished speakers without slicing by the speaker. So we would like to notice that, first of all, the remittances are growing despite the effects of the pandemic. We are noticing that particularly during the crisis that was caused by the pandemic, the remittances have demonstrated their extremely important role of an economic buttress for countries like Moldova. and proved their countercyclical function, which was mentioned by Manuel Roscoe. But at the same time, as we have seen from the presentation by Ms. Angela Muraro, if we look at the statistics of exactly how they are sent and what is the usual amounts that are sent, mostly we talk about the remittances that do not exceed $500 in value. Hence, there are still gaps in terms of how these savings can be in fact mobilized at scale for ensuring productive investments, be it in savings and credit or in starting their own businesses. And here it was coming in very handy, the presentation of the programs and their overview provided by Olesya Frunze in the sense of describing what is happening with the PARA program, but also introducing other programs at the level provided by ODIM itself. And ensuring that the returning migrants who would like to start their own businesses back in Moldova would be able to do that with the maximum support, particularly through seed funding, other capacity buildings, and other required instruments. But also, it is extremely important, and I'm glad as a climate change advisor that has been accorded particular attention, that the climate lens of migration will only increase in its importance as a policy topic in migration discourse in Moldova. And in this case, it has been of a particular satisfaction to hear that at the state level, in terms of policies related to mitigation and adaptation, according to implementation of the Paris Agreement, migration starts being taken seriously. And we are noticing that the climate migration and necessity to mobilize remittances to fight the consequences of climate change in Moldova is already acknowledged and starts to be acted upon. With that, for the sake of brevity, I would like to conclude here and hand it back over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Kaim, for this very short and clear conclusion. And with that being said, I would like to welcome back Mr. Vasily Yujanin for the main conclusions from panel 3 on labor mobility and skills. Mr. Vasily, the screen is yours.
Thank you very much, Chair. And in fact, I would like to say that despite of being short in time, I think we managed to collect major insights and ideas on importance of cooperation on skills and mobility, partnerships on skills, and policy solutions that are needed on the regional, national, bilateral basis, and how all this may be linked to the development. To be frank, I would love to have another round of questions to my panelists, but just in brief, to summarize what we had, and that was great to hear again the policy solutions that are taken on the EU level with respect to the Pact on Migration and Asylum, and the strong emphasis that is given there to labor mobility, labor migration, and also the proactive perhaps position from the EU to focus on labor market based labor mobility and focusing on talents. And while I understand well that the European Commission, European Union position on talents is really that we all talented. It's just important that the skills and the talent we have is finding its place in the labor market in a proper way. So the talent pool is really an important thing. And what was mentioned by the European Commission is the fact that we also look at other aspects that related to labor mobility, issues of integration, issues of permit, issues of other aspects related to migration that need reform and change. And this is really a reflection of the fluidity of the situation, the changing nature of labor mobility. Was great to hear the representative from the Ministry of Health, Labor and Social Protection on the aspects related to reforms on the national level, and in fact also covering the aspects of ethical recruitment, aspects of licensing of the private recruitment agencies and other actors, the unification of approach, making the approach more effective and sustainable, and at the same time also the reflection on how that can be incorporated into bilateral discussions with the major destination areas like EU or destination countries like the UK and other destinations. So, well, at the same time, again, my real appreciation also to have the perspectives from the Ministry of Education, and this is the panel which allowed us to have different perspectives, and education is becoming, well, my skills being the cornerstone of labor mobility, or skills-based labor mobility. Hence, the education has an important part of regulation, and all the initiatives that are linked to this as the initiatives on the national level. And what I particularly would like to emphasize is this orientation on the needs of the migrant workers in terms of what type of skills they need, what type of training they would need in order to be inserted at the labor market, but also reinserted when it's back. And this is connected to the integration aspects of return. And also the vision on non-formally taken education is an important aspect, and that really correlates to the current momentum, which is well reflected in the roadmap on platform work, on distance work. So something that we are doing now, and something that we will need to embrace. I really was really interested to hear the perspectives from the UK, and that also contributes to the discussion on skills-based mobility and how it is reflected in the efforts of states of destination to achieve better match between the labor market needs and skills-based migration and mobility, and at the same time the insights on cooperation on development and interaction between donor countries and countries of origin. This is really important overall aspects that are there. And I would like to conclude, and again, sorry for cutting this discussion, but that was really interesting what we've heard from the representatives of our sister agencies, the UNDP, and different digital aspects and solutions on how to map the diaspora, how to map and collect the information from big data sources, from web scraping, on the needs of the diaspora, on the needs of migrant workers. And the work which is done in that respect really requires a lot of attention and prioritization in our more and more becoming digital world. Again, I would like to continue this discussion, but thank you for giving the opportunity to participate and to share some insights on skills and labor mobility. Thank you, Oksana.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vasily. Indeed, I think this topic is very, very complex, and we can maybe take a few days to discuss just about labor mobility and skills, and hope we will have the chance to do it in another occasion. But anyway, thank you very much. It was very interesting and I think informative for all of us. And with this being said, ladies and gentlemen, here we are at our last session. Which is the closing remarks one. I'm confident each of us will leave with a lot of takes away home. Like we said, there are so many issues yet to be addressed on migration and sustainable development in Moldova, but these are not problems. These are opportunities for the government, for IOM, for UNDP, for development partners, and many other stakeholders to join efforts and transform migration from a problem into an opportunity for this country. With this being said, it is my great pleasure to welcome back Ms. Dima Al-Kadip, UNDP resident representative of the Republic of Moldova, for her final remarks. Dear Dima, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much, Oksana, and thank you everyone. I mean, this has been an extremely interesting discussion, very rich and very, I mean, informative to say the least, but I am very pleased really, and I'm sure that Lars will share the same thought, to see that, you know, there is a lot of also passion going into these discussions, because it's really touching every way of development. Obviously, and from the discussions, there is a lot of follow-up to do. There's a lot of you know, continuous mobilization of partnerships and ownership, whether at the central or at the local level. And I'm sure that we will be keeping you know, the momentum that has been established through this discussion to really make this roadmap happen. As I said at the beginning, this is a multi-year one, and it's a multi-dimensional one. And you know, more to come as we move forward. I'm really looking forward to you know, joining forces not only with IOM, who's our natural partner, but also with others to really make it happen. So thank you for all the moderators, for all the speakers, and the panelists. I mean, this has been really fantastic. So this is from my side, more to come. I mean, this is not the end of this dialogue. I think more will be coming. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dima. And I'd also like to add, is it okay to come in, Oksana?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay, yes, we have the swirl, and here we are. So I'd just like to also add, Dima, that this has been extremely encouraging. If I even start to read up some of the takeaways, then I wouldn't stop, and I would not do justice to the rich discussions that we have. Of course, I would leave some out, and that wouldn't be fair. But we will certainly come back to all of you with a good report that brings out the takeaways from this. There have been really a number of really important pronouncements here that we really should reflect on and build upon. But I'd just like to say two things. First of all, that I'm really encouraged by there are so many Moldovan government agencies that have expressed that they really see themselves as a part in this roadmap. So this is something that we have really taken to heart. And also, another fact is that IOM and UNDP, and I include also the UN country team at large here in Moldova, we feel that we really are not alone, but we are really part of a big community that are interested in these key aspects in Moldova, because it's a little bit of a laboratory and a lot of things have been tested out, but it seems like we need to take it to another level of implementation more broadly. So thanks very much. We are extremely encouraged to take this roadmap forward. So thanks very much, Oksana, for carrying this through. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lundback. Thank you all. With this being said, I think it is the time to conclude and to close this event. We cannot do it before thanking to the organizers for such an excellent initiative. Special thanks to all the panelists for their very informative interventions and contributions to the event. And last but not least, to the audience for their patience, participation, and interest. Finally, all our congratulations to Mr. Daniel Noyoks and the larger team for such a complex output, which we are very confident is not the end, but is the beginning, and will pave the way for many more interesting joint projects. And we hope we will echo about them in Moldova, but also abroad. With this being said, we thank you all for your attention and wish you all a nice day evening, good night, good morning, wherever you are. Thank you very much.